There is a moment, subtle, quiet, yet piercing, when we hear two voices inside us speak at once. One shouts in fear, doubts, and resistance. The other whispers in stillness, truth, and peace. This is the eternal dialogue that unfolds within every human being. The inner battle between the ego and the higher self. It doesn't only appear in great spiritual crises or deep meditative states. It shows up when your alarm goes off and you debate whether to get up or snooze. It shows up when someone criticizes you and you feel the need to defend yourself or stay silent. It shows up when you have a dream and one voice says, "Go for it," while the other says, "Who do you think you are?" You live with these two voices every single day, and most of the time we don't even realize that they are not the same. The ego is not just arrogance or selfishness. It is the conditioned self, the mask we put on to survive, to be accepted, to avoid pain. The higher self is not just your intuition. It is the deeper knowing within you, the part of you that existed before fear, shame, and doubt were learned. To truly understand who we are, we must begin to separate the two, not as a mental concept but as a lived experience. Take a moment now and breathe. Notice the thoughts running through your mind. Some are frantic, repetitive, filled with what-ifs. Others are still, clear, simple, like a stream of light breaking through the fog. Which voice are you listening to right now? In many traditions, from ancient mysticism to modern psychology, there is an understanding that we are not just one self. We are layered, we are complex, but beneath that complexity lies a core, pure awareness, untouched and eternal. The ego in its nature is loud. It constantly seeks validation. It feeds on comparison, status, control. It needs to be someone, to prove something, to protect itself at all costs. The higher self, by contrast, is subtle. It is not interested in impressing. It is interested in expressing. It doesn't push. It invites. It isn't push. It invites. The ego says, "I am what I have. I am what others think of me. I am what I achieve." The higher self says, "I am." Have you ever paused just long enough to feel that? The higher self says, "I am." Have you ever paused just long enough to feel that? It is space between two thoughts. It is knowing without words. That is where the higher self lives. You're not here to demonize the ego. You will explore later how it came to be and why it has a role to play. But in this moment, let's just begin to observe it. When someone disagrees with you, which voice reacts? When you're alone in silence, which voice speaks? When well invites you to step into something bigger, which voice do you hear first? Do you hear first? This chapter is an invitation, not to choose sides, but to become aware, to become conscious of the unseen battle that shapes your entire life. You are not the voice in your head. You are the awareness that hears it. You are the awareness that hears it. You are the awareness that hears it, that knows. You could awareness, and in that awareness, everything begins. Sometimes, the ego doesn't scream, it seduces. It tells you you're not ready yet. It says you need just one more course, one more certificate, one more year of preparation. It hides behind perfectionism and procrastination. And sometimes, it tells you the opposite, that you're better than others, that you're better than others, that you've already arrived, that there's nothing left to learn. The ego's voice is rarely honest, but it is clever. It wears many masks. Pride, guilt, doubt, blame. It can make you feel like a victim or a god. But underneath it all, it is afraid of dissolving, afraid of losing control, afraid of the truth that it is not who you really are. Now let's turn to the other voice, the one that doesn't beg to be heard, the one that waits patiently for you to become quiet. This voice does not speak in fear. It speaks in presence. It may come as a sudden knowing, a gut feeling, moment of peace in the middle of chaos. It doesn't argue. It doesn't justify. It simply is. This voice may feel unfamiliar because we've been trained not to trust it. Note, society celebrates the loud, the quick, the certain, but the higher self speaks through stillness. It speaks through the space between breaths, through the rhythm of the heart, through the grace of surrender. The truth is, we were all born connected to this self. As children, we lived in wonder. We danced without reason. We sang off-key. We loved without condition. We didn't need permission to be. But over time, layers formed. We learned to perform, to earn love, to avoid rejection. And with every mask we put on, we forgot a little more of who we truly were. The voice of ego got louder, the voice of truth quieter, but it never left. It can't leave because it is you. You may have moments, fleeting, glowing, where you feel completely aligned, like you're in the right place, at the right time, doing exactly what you're meant to. That's not luck. That's a glimpse of your higher self. It shows up when you help someone with no agenda, when you create something and lose track of time, when you forgive someone, not because they asked, but because you're ready to let go. In those moments, you are not acting, you are being. So how do we begin to hear this voice more clearly? Not by silencing the ego forcefully, but by becoming aware of it. By noticing it with gentle curiosity. Ask yourself, who is speaking in me right now? Is it love, or is it fear? Is it expansion, or contraction? Is it truth, or a story I've been telling myself for years? This awareness is the beginning of transformation. Because once you recognize the voices, you are no longer lost in them. You become the observer, the witness, the chooser. Every time you pause before reacting, the higher self gets stronger. Every time you choose love over fear, the ego gets quieter. Every time you tell yourself the truth, even when it hurts, you return to who you are. This is not a one-time decision. It is a path, a practice, a daily remembering. And with every small choice, you move closer to truth, to wholeness, to home, to home, to home. The two voices will always be there. But now you know, you don't have to believe them both. You can listen, you can discern, you can choose. And that, dear soul, is the beginning of awakening. You don't need to be a monk to hear the voice of your soul. It doesn't require a mountaintop or years of silence. In fact, the sacred often speaks loudest in the most mundane moments. Folding laundry, waiting in traffic, watching the rain hit your window. These are invitations, not distractions. Moments that ask nothing of you except to be here fully. Because presence is the only language the higher self understands. The ego, on the other hand, thrives in the future and the past. It feeds on regret, on what if, on when I finally get there. It whispers that happiness is always elsewhere, just out of reach. But the truth, the higher self, only exists now. Right here, right in this breath, this pause. What's profound is how subtle it is. It won't force its way in. It waits for permission. The moment you turn inward, even briefly, it meets you there. Perhaps you felt it while staring at the stars. That sense of smallness, not as insignificance, but as freedom. The ego dissolves when you remember how vast life is. Or maybe it appeared in grief, when all distractions fell away. In the stillness after heartbreak, in the pause after loss. There it was, silent, steady, unshaken. The presence that wrapped around your brokenness. Not to fix it, but to hold it. To let you know you were never alone. Because the higher self doesn't demand transformation. It offers remembrance. Not be better, but come home. That is its whisper. The dance. Ironically, the more you chase it, the further it seems to drift. Why? Because chasing is a function of the ego. The belief that something is missing, that there's a gap to close, that you must earn your way back to yourself. The higher self waits in the surrender, in the softening, in the radical realization that you are already enough. Not when you fix yourself, not when you achieve more. Now is where it lives. This isn't philosophy, it's practice. The inner battle we face daily is not about choosing sides once, it's about noticing who is driving the moment. When you're impatient in traffic, is it ego or soul that's reacting? When you scroll social media and feel lesser, whose voice is that? Each choice, each breath, each pause. It's an opening, a doorway. Then here's what's beautiful: the higher self doesn't punish. It never shames you for forgetting. It simply waits. It simply waits. Patient as the sunrise. It sure as the tide. Ready when you are. It doesn't ask you to be anyone else. It only asks for your presence, your honesty, your willingness to remember. This journey isn't about becoming. It's about unbecoming. It's about unbecoming. Then, unlearning the noise, letting go of the masks, returning to essence. Imagine you're a diamond buried in layers of mud. The ego is the mud, necessary at times, protective even. But it's not the truth of what you are. Your worth doesn't increase when the mud is washed off. It only becomes visible. You are always radiant, always enough, always enough, always sacred. To realize this isn't arrogance, it's freedom. Because when you know you are light, you don't need to dim anyone else. You don't need to prove anything. You simply shine. In that light awakens others. So pause with me just for a moment. Feel the breath moving through you. Notice the stillness beneath the thought, the silence that holds the noise. That's stirring noise. That's stirring loss. The presence. The presence. The spaciousness between the words. You've always been here. Some people call it intuition. Others call it God. Some feel it as presence, a knowing, and a soft nudge in the quiet moments. Regardless of the name, you've felt it before. In a moment of stillness where time felt suspended. In an act of kindness that made you feel more like yourself. And a decision that came from peace, not pressure. These are not random. They are whispers from your soul. And while the ego may scream with urgency, the higher self always speaks with calm clarity. It doesn't panic. It doesn't rush. It trusts. That's how you begin to tell the difference. Not by analyzing, but by feeling. The ego feels tight, narrow, reactive. The higher self feels open, wide, gentle. This is not a theory. This is experiential truth. You don't need a book or a teacher to validate it. Your own body tells you. When you're in ego, your chest constricts. Your breath shortens. Your thoughts race. When you're in the higher self, everything slows. The breath deepens. The heart softens. The space, not just around you, but within you, within you. In you feel it now. The difference. One builds walls. The other builds bridges. One seeks control. The other surrenders to flow. The other surrenders to flow. Then both incredibly live within you. It's not about demonizing one and glorifying the other. It's about awareness. About knowing who's speaking and choosing with consciousness. Because without awareness, the ego takes the wheel by default. Not because it's evil, but because it's afraid. It thinks it has to protect you. And sometimes it does. But when protection becomes identity, we forget who we are. So we return. Again and again and again. To presence. To love. The truth. The voice of the higher self doesn't promise ease, but it always points toward peace. Even when the path is uncomfortable. Even when it requires letting go. Because what it offers isn't comfort, it's alignment. Authenticity. A life that reflects who you really are beneath the noise. That's what this battle is really about. Not good versus bad. Not light versus dark. But real versus false. Truth versus illusion. So the next time you feel the pull, the tug of war inside, not to judge, not to fix, just to notice, ask yourself, which voice is speaking? Does this feel like fear or freedom? Tightness or expansion? Reaction or response? The tight is the beginning of mastery, not the elimination of ego, but the rise of awareness. Not the elimination of ego, but the rise of awareness. Not control, but choice. And over time, with devotion, the higher self becomes louder. Not because it changed, but because you got quieter. Stillness becomes your strength. That presence becomes your power. And truth becomes your compass. That is the work. This is the work. Not outside, but inward. Not in striving, but in remembering. So here at the edge of this first chapter, I invite you to listen more closely, to soften, when you want to harden, to soften when you want to harden, to breathe when you want to react, to choose presence when ego demands distraction. And that because in those small sacred choices, you reclaim your truth, you reclaim your peace. You remember you are not the noise, you are the one who hears it. And that changes everything. The tests continue. There is a part of you that wants to be seen, that wants to be admired, validated, praised. A part that fears being wrong, that needs to be right, that builds stories of self to survive in a world of mirrors. That part is called the ego. It is not your enemy. It is not a flaw. It is not a mistake in your design. The ego is a mechanism. The ego is a mechanism, a psychological construct, a protective shell that formed when you began to perceive yourself as separate. It was born the moment you first said may, when the child realized they were not the mother, not the blanket, not the air around them. The separation gave rise to identity, and identity gave birth to the ego. Psychologically, ego is a set of thoughts you have about yourself. It includes your roles, your memories, your preferences, and your name. It is how you distinguish yourself from others. A collection of mental images stitched together to form a self. Spiritually, it is the illusion of separateness. The belief that you are a wave disconnected from the ocean, a drop pretending to be apart from the sea. And while this illusion is powerful, it is not truth. Truth is that you are whole. You always were. But the ego does not know this. The ego cannot know this, because the ego is born of fear. It fears death. It fears not being enough. It fears not being loved. It fears not being loved. And it builds an entire life around avoiding these fears. It wears masks. It performs. It compares and competes and chases. It needs to be the best. Or at least, not the worst. Ego doesn't just show up as arrogance. It can also appear as insecurity. It is victimhood, is self-doubt, is overachievement. It can also appear as insecurity, as victimhood, as self-doubt, as overachievement, or perfectionism. Because ego is not about confidence. It's about control. It's about control. Control over how you're seen. Control over outcomes. Control over the chaos of being human. It fights for this control like its life depends on it. Because to the ego it does. It's of this is why the ego resists change. Why it clings to old identities even when they're painful. Why it sabotages relationships. Why it rejects anything that threatens the story it has built. You see, the ego doesn't care if you're happy. It only cares that you're consistent, that you stay within the boundaries of what it knows, even if those boundaries are made of suffering. It is rigid and fragile. Beak, always on guard. Beak, always on edge. That underneath that armor is a deep longing to rest, to soften, to remember who it was before it became afraid. That's the paradox. The ego, though born of fear, longs for the peace of the higher self. It doesn't know how to get there. So it keeps trying to build heaven with bricks made of fear. It tries to earn worthiness, to perform for love, to control its way into peace. That peace cannot be earned. That peace cannot be earned. It must be remembered. It cannot be forced. It must be allowed. It is the ego does not allow. That ego does not allow. That the ego does not allow. That it is. This is not to shame it. This is to understand it. To see it clearly. To stop identifying with it. To see it clearly. To stop identifying with it. To start witnessing it. Because the moment you observe the ego, you are no longer it. The observer is not the story. The awareness is not the voice. The awareness is not the voice. The awareness is not the voice. The more you become the witness, the less the ego controls you. That because it disappears. That because it loses its grip. that because it loses its grip, that becomes a passenger, that driver, and when the ego isn't driving, the road becomes very different, that always easier, that much more true, and in that truth, you begin to breathe again. To understand the ego more deeply, we must first recognize that it is not inherently bad or evil. It is simply the mind's tool for navigating the world. It serves a function, a necessary one for survival in this physical reality. The ego is the mechanism that helps us relate to the external world, to identify ourselves as individuals, and to make sense of experiences. Without the ego, we would not be able to interact with the world in any meaningful way. However, where the ego goes astray is in over-identifying with the self-image it creates. It mistakes this image for the entirety of who we are. It clings to the idea of I, seeing itself as separate from everything else, as isolated, as unique in a world full of others. In this way, the ego is the source of much of our suffering. When we over-identify with the ego, we begin to see the world through the lens of duality. We perceive everything in terms of us versus them. We feel that we must compete, achieve, and defend in order to protect our fragile sense of self. We become trapped in cycles of comparison, judgment, and expectation. And yet, none of this is necessary for our true fulfillment. In fact, it is precisely these habits of mind that prevent us from experiencing the peace and clarity that lie within. When we look closely at the ego, we realize that it is merely a collection of thoughts and beliefs. These thoughts are learned and conditioned through years of interaction with the world, but they are not who we truly are. The ego thrives on identification. It needs to attach itself to something. It identifies with body, career, possessions, opinions, and status. It sees these external things as indicators of worth and success. But this attachment to the external world is temporary and unreliable. An external can be taken away, changed, or lost. When that happens, the ego feels threatened. This is the nature of attachment. It is a form of grasping. The ego is always grasping for more, for validation, for approval. It believes that if it just has enough of these things, it will be whole. But the truth is that the ego is already whole. It is the attachment itself that causes pain. In spiritual terms, attachment to the ego creates a false sense of identity. We begin to believe that we are our ego. We think that the thoughts, opinions, and labels that the ego holds define us. But this is an illusion. We are not our ego. We are not the labels or the stories it tells. The ego can only survive as long as it continues to hold on to its false identity. When we let go of this identification, the ego begins to dissolve. This doesn't mean the ego disappears completely. Rather, it becomes more flexible and less dominant. It no longer dictates our actions or defines our sense of self. A key practice in this process is mindfulness. Mindfulness helps us observe the ego without attaching to it. When we become aware of the thoughts that arise in our minds, we can begin to see them for what they are, mental patterns and habits. We can notice when the ego is at work, trying to protect itself, trying to gain approval, trying to control. In this way, mindfulness allows us to step outside of the ego's narrative. It gives us the space to see that we are not our thoughts. We are the awareness behind those thoughts. And this is where true freedom lies. When we stop identifying with the ego's desires and fears, we begin to live more authentic. We start to understand that our worth is not defined by external achievements or validation. We are not what we do, what we have, or how others see us. We are the essence of pure consciousness, infinite, unchanging, and whole. This is the beauty of transcending the ego. We awaken to the truth of who we really are. And in this awakening, we find peace. When we speak of the ego in spiritual terms, we are referring to the false self, the mask we wear to interact with the world. It is the lens through which we interpret everything around us. The ego is not a singular thing, but a collection of thoughts, beliefs, and memories, accumulated over time. It is the result of conditioning, the stories we are told by society, culture, and our upbringing. And it's these stories that form the framework of our identity. The ego is like a house built on shifting sands. It is constantly changing, evolving, and adapting to the environment, but it never truly feels stable. This is why so many people experience inner turmoil and dissatisfaction. despite achieving success or gaining material wealth. The ego may momentarily feel validated by external success, but it always craves more. It is never content because it is built on an illusion of separation. The ego thrives on judgment and comparison. It is always measuring and categorizing, looking for ways to feel superior or inferior to others. This is why we so often feel a need to prove ourselves, to demonstrate our worth in comparison to someone else. The ego wants recognition, acknowledgement, and affirmation. It believes that its value is determined by the opinions of others. This is the trap of the ego. It looks outward for validation, never turning inward to recognize its own inherent worth. It is constantly seeking approval from the outside world, never realizing that true fulfillment comes from within. When we live from the ego, we place our sense of self-worth in the hands of others. We allow external circumstances to define us. The ego also creates a sense of scarcity. It tells us that there is never enough, not enough love, not enough success, not enough approval. This creates a constant sense of lack, a feeling that we must strive and compete to get what we want. But in reality, the universe operates from a place of abundance. There is more than enough love, success, and fulfillment for everyone. The scarcity mindset of the ego prevents us from seeing this abundance. It keeps us trapped in fear, believing that there is not enough to go around. That when we begin to shift our perception and align with our higher self, we see that the universe is a place of infinite possibility. We begin to understand that everything we need is already within us, waiting to be discovered. The ego's illusions are not only about external things. The ego also creates illusions about who we are, telling us that we are separate, limited, and defined by our experiences. It tells us that we are our past, our mistakes, our successes, and our failures. That the truth is much deeper than that. We are not defined by our past or our experiences. We are eternal, limitless beings, connected to the divine source of all creation. When we begin to question the ego's stories, we start to break free from its grip. We begin to see through the illusion of separation and recognize our true nature. We see that the ego is not who we are, but simply a tool for navigating the material world. And once we understand this, we can stop identifying with it. This shift in perspective is the beginning of spiritual awakening. It is the moment when we realize that we are not bound by the limitations of the ego. We begin to understand that the ego is simply a part of our experience, but it does not define our essence. We are much more than the ego can ever conceive. In the presence of the higher self, the ego no longer has the power to control or dictate our lives. But it becomes a servant, not a master. And in this shift we find true peace, true freedom, and true fulfillment. To understand the higher self, we must first acknowledge that there is more to us than the body, mind, and ego. The higher self is the divine essence that exists beyond our individual identity. It is the part of us that is connected to the infinite wisdom of the universe, pure consciousness, the eternal spark of life that transcends time and space. It is the aspect of ourselves that is aligned with truth, love, and oneness. The higher self is not something that we acquire or develop through effort. It is not something separate from us. It is, in fact, the very essence of who we are at the deepest level. The problem is that, through the conditioning of the ego and the distractions of the material world, we lose touch with this aspect of ourselves. We begin to identify with the ego, with our thoughts, and with our external circumstances, forgetting that we are more than just the sum of these parts. The higher self, however, is always present, always within us. It is the quiet voice within, the feeling of inner peace that arises when we are aligned with our true nature. That is the part of us that sees beyond the illusions of the ego and the material world. It understands that we are not separate from one another, but deeply interconnected with all of existence. The one way to think of the higher self is as the soul's true nature. It is the timeless, eternal aspect of who we are, the part of us that has never been born and will never die. The higher self transcends the individual personality or identity that we form through our experiences. It is the core of our being, the unchanging, ever-present essence that exists beyond the fluctuations of the mind and emotions. When we connect with our higher self, we are able to see the world through the lens of love, compassion, and unity. We begin to understand that everything we experience is part of the divine plan, that there are no accidents or coincidences. We recognize that every challenge we face is an opportunity for growth, and that everything in life is unfolding in perfect harmony. The higher self holds infinite wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. It has access to the universal truths that transcend the limitations of the human mind. This wisdom is not learned through intellectual study or analysis. It is known through direct experience, through inner knowing, through a deep connection to the divine source. The higher self is also the source of our deepest intuition. When we are in tune with our higher self, we experience a deep sense of knowing, a gut feeling, an inner compass that guides us toward our highest good. This intuition is not the same as the thinking mind, which is often clouded by fear, doubt, and judgment. The intuition of the higher self is pure, clear, and untainted by the ego. It is the whisper of truth, the silent voice that leads us to our true path. To access the wisdom of the higher self, we must quiet the noise of the ego and the mind. This is where practices like meditation, stillness, and deep reflection come in. When we create space for silence, we open ourselves to the wisdom that lies beyond the ego's chatter. In this stillness, we are able to hear the voice of the higher self more clearly. The higher self is not something that we need to search for, because it is always within us. It is not a distant goal or a future attainment. It is the very essence of who we are, always present, always waiting for us to remember. In fact, the higher self is not separate from the divine, it is one with the source of all creation. When we align with the higher self, we align with the universe itself, tapping into the flow of infinite intelligence. This is the power of living from the higher self. We begin to experience life as a seamless expression of divine will. We trust the process of life, knowing that everything is unfolding perfectly. We let go of the need for control, knowing that we are guided by something far greater than the limitations of the ego. And in this surrender, we experience true freedom. As we deepen our connection with the higher self, we begin to notice that life starts to flow with greater ease and grace. This is the natural result of living in alignment with our true nature. We no longer feel the need to force or struggle through life. Instead, we surrender to the unfolding of the divine plan. The higher self operates from a place of trust and love, and when we align with it, we too experience this deep sense of trust in life. One of the key qualities of the higher self is its ability to see beyond duality, the illusion of separation. The ego thrives on division, right and wrong, good and bad, us versus them. That the higher self transcends this dualistic thinking. It sees everything as interconnected, as part of the same divine whole. In the presence of the higher self, there is no judgment, only understanding and compassion. This perspective is profoundly liberating. When we stop seeing ourselves as separate from others, we begin to experience a deep sense of oneness with all of life. We understand that the struggles and challenges we face are not just our own, but part of the collective human experience. This awareness helps us move beyond personal grievances and judgments, and instead, cultivate empathy and love. The higher self also reveals to us the deep purpose behind everything we experience. When we live in alignment with the higher self, we stop seeing obstacles as hindrances. Instead, we see them as opportunities for growth, learning, and transformation. We come to understand that everything in our lives is happening for our highest good, even when it may appear difficult or challenging. This is the wisdom of the higher self. It knows that we are not here to simply survive, but to evolve, expand, and grow into our fullest potential. The challenges we face are simply stepping stones on our journey of spiritual awakening. Each trial, each setback, is an invitation to step deeper into our truth and align more fully with our divine essence. Another key aspect of the higher self is its ability to see the big picture. While the ego is focused on short-term desires and immediate gratification, the higher self is concerned with the long-term vision, the larger purpose of our soul's journey. It understands that true fulfillment comes not from momentary pleasure, but from living a life of meaning and purpose. The higher self leads us to choices that are in alignment with our deepest values and highest aspirations. This is why it is so important to cultivate a relationship with the higher self. When we ignore this inner voice, we risk being led astray by the fleeting desires of the ego. But when we listen to the higher self, we are guided toward a life of greater fulfillment, joy, and peace. We begin to make choices that reflect our true essence, and as a result, we experience a sense of harmony and alignment in all areas of our lives. The higher self is also deeply connected to the heart. While the ego often operates from the head, seeking validation through external achievements and accomplishments, the higher self speaks through the heart. It is the voice of love, compassion, and forgiveness. When we are in touch with our higher self, we feel a deep sense of love and connection to others. We no longer see people as separate from us, but as reflections of the same divine source. This heart-centered approach to life is what leads to true fulfillment. When we live from the heart, we stop seeking external validation and begin to find contentment within ourselves. We experience a deep sense of peace, knowing that we are worthy of love and happiness simply because we exist. In this space, we are free to be our authentic selves, without the need for approval or recognition from others. As we move through life, we will encounter moments where the ego tries to take over. It may tell us that we are not enough, that we must prove ourselves, or that we are separate from others. But in these moments, we can choose to pause, breathe, and return to the truth of who we are, the higher self. When we reconnect with our true essence, we align with the flow of life, and the ego's voice fades into the background. Reconnecting with the higher self transforms ordinary moments into portals of grace. In silence, the soul speaks most clearly. In the rhythm of your heartbeat, you feel its steady presence. Every gentle breath is an invitation to return home. Across ancient mystical traditions, the higher self is known by many names. Atman, Buddha nature, divine spark, Christ consciousness. Each teaching points to the same inner reality, a timeless essence that transcends mind and form. In Vedanta, sages describe it as the unchanging witness behind all changing thoughts. In Taoism, it is the Tao flowing effortlessly through every moment. In Sufism, it appears as the beloved within the heart. Modern psychology calls it the true self, an innate core untouched by trauma, conditioning, or fear. Research in mindfulness reveals that accessing this core reduces stress, increases well-being, and fosters authentic creativity. Neuroscience shows that moments of self-transcendence correlate with coherence across brain networks. These findings hint at the unity behind mind, heart, and body when tuned to the higher self. On a practical level, the higher self communicates through subtle signals, gut feelings, synchronicities, and intuitive nudges. Intuitive nudges. You may sense a gentle pull toward a new idea or opportunity without knowing why. A chance meeting may unfold exactly when you need guidance. A dream may reveal the next step on your path. When we honor these inner messages, doors open effortlessly. Projects flow with inspired momentum. Relationships deepen with compassion and ease. Challenges dissolve into lessons for growth. The higher self also aligns you with universal laws, law of attraction, law of cause and effect, law of correspondence. Working in harmony with these laws brings gentle acceleration to your intentions. When you act from the higher self, you become a co-creator with life's intelligence. Creativity blossoms when you step aside and let your soul's wisdom guide your hands. Artists call this state flow, a merging of self and source. Scientists experience breakthrough when they surrender the need for control and trust the process. In healing, the higher self holds space for transformation without judgment. It brings light to shadow, compassion to pain, and restoration to wholeness. When you invite its presence into old wounds, they shift and release. Daily practices deepen this connection. Simple breath awareness grounds you in the present. Journaling with honest questions, what does my higher self want me to see, unlocks hidden insights. Nature walks in attentive stillness remind you of oneness with all life. Gratitude for small gifts opens the heart's door to divine presence. Even mundane tasks, washing dishes, folding laundry, walking the dog, become sacred when offered to the soul. Mindful attention transforms each action into a prayer. Then life itself becomes the altar. Obstacles serve as mirrors of unconscious ego beliefs. When you face frustration, pause and ask, what story am I believing right now? That question cracks the ego's grip and creates a pause for the higher self to speak. In that pause, love arises. Compassion replaces blame. Clarity outshines confusion. As you cultivate this inner relationship, patience grows. You learn that timing is divine. Every delay holds a blessing you cannot yet see. Community of like-hearted souls amplifies this journey. Finding others who value presence and truth creates fertile soil for growth. Sharing insights and experiences remind you that awakening is both personal and collective. Elders and mentors guide the way, but the ultimate teacher is within. Any guru or text only points the path, your higher self lights it. Sometimes the path feels lonely. Old friends may not understand your shift. Family expectations can tug you back into old patterns. These are invitations to stand in your truth, to let your soul's light shine, even if it reveals shadows elsewhere. In those moments, remember, you are never truly alone. Your higher self walks with you. The universe conspires on your behalf. Angelic and ancestor support surround you, whether you sense it or not. Trust arises naturally as you witness synchronicities unfolding. Patterns emerge that are too precise to be random. A fleeting thought, a chance conversation, a sudden insight, each is a breadcrumb on your path. As Chapter 3 draws to a close, we see that the higher self is both profound mystery and intimate companion. It is the source of your deepest wisdom, your greatest peace, and your highest purpose. When you live from this place, life becomes a living prayer. Every step, every challenge, every joy becomes an expression of the divine. In the next chapter, we will explore how childhood conditioning and early experiences shape the ego's formation. We will trace the lines of identity back to their origin, shining light on the stories that keep us small. For now, carry this truth with you. The higher self is not somewhere ahead, it is always here, waiting for you to remember. Your soul's whisper is your true compass. Listen deeply and let it guide your every breath. Long before any mask was needed, the child gazed at the world with unfiltered wonder. In those early days, identity had not yet been carved by judgment or expectation. Every sensation felt vivid and alive, unburdened by the weight of should or shouldn't. Play was not an escape, but a dance of presence, each moment complete in itself. Yet beneath this innocence, the seeds of ego were quietly sown. Through each word of praise, "You're so smart, you're so talented," the child learned to equate worth with performance. Every good job whispered a lesson: you are lovable because of what you do. And in moments of disappointment, "Why can't you be more like your sibling?" the tender self began to fracture. As the world imposed roles, student, athlete, helper, the child adopted identities as lifelines. These roles offered belonging, but at the cost of wholeness. A single boast inflated the ego's sense of importance. A single critique left it trembling in fear. Through constant feedback, the ego fashioned a protective shell of beliefs. "I am only enough when I succeed," it murmured, clutching tightly to achievement. "I must avoid failure at all costs," it insisted, shrinking at every misstep. Family dynamics amplified these early lessons. A parent's unspoken worry taught the child to guard vulnerability. A sibling's rivalry taught the need to prove superiority. Even love became conditional, given or withheld by compliance and alignment. Each household rule carved another layer of separation from the true self. Boundaries meant safety, yet they also meant fragmentation. School became a forge for comparison. Grades measured worth, popularity dictated acceptance. In the cafeteria, alliances formed and dissolved, each shift echoing a deeper fear of rejection. In classrooms, voices rose to be heard, seeking validation from teachers and peers alike. The ego learned early to crave applause and dread silence. Every compliment erected a pedestal, every jeer erected a prison. Cultural narratives reinforced these patterns. Advertisements taught that identity lived in clothing, gadgets, and lifestyles. Stories glorified heroes who conquered through domination, fueling the ego's drive. Fairy tales promised rescue but often discarded inner wisdom for external salvation. Myths of separation whispered that we were fragments in need of accumulation. Yet within this conditioning, a spark persisted. There were stolen moments running through summer fields, laughing until breathless, when the true self peeked through. In children's songs and unguarded hugs, the soul remembered its origin. These flashes of authenticity reminded us that identity is fluid, not fixed. Trauma and absence deepened the ego's grip. A harsh word from a caregiver taught that love must be earned, not freely given. Abandonment whispered, "You are alone, you are unworthy." In such landscapes of pain, the ego erected walls of defensiveness. But even these walls held the longing for healing and reconnection. Please too could cement false identity. The golden child learned to equate love with perfection. Any slip from that pinnacle threatened to topple the entire sense of self. So the ego clung to achievement as proof of deservingness. And beneath the applause lay a hidden tremor of inadequacy. Through these early years, stories formed. I am the smart one. I am the troublemaker. I am the peacekeeper. Each narrative provided structure but also set limits. They became the ego's identity cards, presented to the world at every encounter. Adolescence intensified the drama. The body reshaped itself, and with it came confusion and comparison. Peering into mirrors, the teen searched for approval. On social stages, virtual and real, the ego sought to be seen and feared being unseen. Peer pressure whispered commands like a chant: fit in, stand out, don't be you. In classrooms and sports fields, the ego found fresh arenas for triumph and defeat. Each trophy bolstered its armor. Each setback sharpened its defenses. And every comparison chipped away at the sense of unconditioned self. Yet beneath the turmoil, the soul's quiet call remained. In moments of creative flow, painting, writing, music, the higher self broke through the ego's barricades. In midnight conversations under starry skies, truth bubbled up, free from script. These flickers of authenticity seeded hope of rediscovery. By early adulthood, a mosaic of identities had formed. Professional, partner, parent, friend, each role carried its own costumes and script. We learned to switch effortlessly between them, losing track of the core that existed beneath all masks. When crises struck, career changes, heartbreak, loss, the ego clung tighter to its narratives. But pain also cracked the stories open, offering glimpses of what lay beneath. This chapter marks the turning point. Here we begin to trace the ego's formation back to its origins. With compassionate curiosity, we'll shine light on the conditioning that shaped our false self. And beneath every layer of praise, blame, and expectation, we'll seek the unchanging essence that has always remained. In our next segment, we will explore the nature of pure awareness, the higher self's domain, and contrast it with the mind's chatter. By understanding our beginnings, we reclaim the freedom to choose who we become. Let us continue. Each new layer of conditioning grew quietly, yet persistently, shaping the child's sense of self. In moments of praise for excelling on a spelling test or scoring a goal, the ego smiled with pride. It whispered, "You are smart," and the child beamed, unaware of the seed that was planted. But in the hush following a mistake, a different voice emerged, tiny yet insistent: "You are not enough." These dual messages, good and bad, wove themselves into the fabric of identity. The family gatherings offered another classroom. Uncle's eye roll taught that some feelings were unwelcome. A mother's sigh at childhood messes signaled that perfection was prized above play. Each reaction carved a path in the young psyche, guiding the ego's future demands. From these subtle cues, the ego learned which parts of the self it must hide. Toy boxes overflowed with colorful shapes, blocks, dolls, cars, mirroring the fluidity of a child's essence. Yet the world pressed for labels: boy or girl, quiet or loud, achiever or daydreamer. These labels created momentum, pushing the ego to cling to a chosen identity. Be the good girl, the inner voice insisted after a teacher's praise. Show them you're smart, urged the memory of proud parental eyes. At the playground, alliances formed and shifted like currents in a river. Fitting in became a subtle art, matching laughter, mimicking speech, mirroring body language. The ego recognized safety in harmony and danger in difference. Each social script the child learned hardened into another brick of the identity wall. Yet every moment of genuine joy offered a crack in that wall, a glimpse of unconditioned self. As words like should and shouldn't filtered in, the child's natural spontaneity echoed faintly. Should sit still, whispered school rules. Shouldn't cry, cautioned early lessons in emotional control. Each injunction built invisible fences around expression. From these fences, the ego learned to police thoughts and feelings. In art class, finger paints blurred boundaries on paper, but the ego frowned at messy hands. The yearning for creativity clashed with the drive for neatness. Another lesson: art is valued when it looks good. And so the ego turned play into performance. Authentic exploration retreated beneath fear of criticism. Nighttime brought dreams untethered by expectation, fleeting memories of self beyond roles. Yet morning light demanded the daily persona, student, sibling, friend. Awakening became a transition from soul to script. The ego supervised that transition, ensuring each mask fit perfectly. In this choreography of identity, choices narrowed. Moments of solitude occasionally cracked the routine. A solitary walk in the garden, barefoot on cool grass, resurrected a whisper, "Remember who you are." Those whispers belonged not to the ego, but to the child's unconditioned essence. They hinted at freedom beneath the roles. Yet the ego often drowned them with rehearsed fears. Adolescence ushered in new mirrors, social media, peer feedback, romantic entanglements. Early likes on shared photos fed the ego's hunger for approval. A public comment, negative or teasing, tightened its grip. The adolescent identity became a performance on a digital stage. Yet even there, stolen moments, sunsets watched alone, recalled the child's unfiltered wonder. The ego capitalized on those moments of insecurity. It whispered that belonging required conformity, the right clothes, opinions, attitudes. Authenticity felt risky, too raw, too likely to be rejected. So the ego wrote new rules: blend in to be safe, and creativity and spontaneity shrank accordingly. Yet beneath the teen's head full of thoughts, the soul's quiet pulse persisted. In the rhythm of doodles in notebooks, the higher self sketched the outline of truth. In the cadence of a favorite song, it hummed a melody of freedom. These fragments of presence survived the ego's editing. They carried the memory of innocence and belonging beyond masks. Entering adulthood, the ego wielded greater tools: ambition, responsibility, self-criticism. Career choices felt like verdicts on worth. Relationships became tests of compatibility and validation. Financial success measured security. Each arena taught the ego new strategies for self-protection. But crises, job loss, heartbreak, illness fractured the ego's illusions. When safety nets disappeared, fear pressed hard. Yet within that fear lay an invitation to release the shells built over a lifetime. To rediscover the essence that thrived before any role was assigned. In those crucibles, choice emerged: cling to identity constructs, or lean into the unknown. Some chose numbness, burying pain beneath busyness. Others chose awakening, listening to that faint voice beneath the roar. The path of awakening demands courage to face the ego's defenses. Each defense dismantled reveals more of the child's shining core. This ongoing unraveling is the true birth of the self, not the scripted self taught by external expectations, but the sovereign self that transcends praise and blame. In the space between each unlearning lies pure awareness, a sanctuary beyond judgments, a kingdom where the soul's infinite potential dwells. As we continue, we will explore how pure awareness, the higher self, reveals itself amid the mind's turbulence. We'll trace the threads from ego's origin to the present moment, discovering practices that bring us back to essence. Hold this chapter close. Every layer of conditioning can be tenderly released. The child you once were awaits behind the stories you've told yourself. And in rediscovering that child, the true self arises, radiant and free. A flicker of surprise crossed young eyes the first time praise came wrapped in comparison. A compliment meant to uplift "you draw so well" hid a shadow, but Jenny draws better. In that moment, the ego learned two lessons at once: longing for approval and fearing that it might be withdrawn. Before language formed, the body remembered the rhythm of unconditional love. Yet each new syllable spoken by caregivers carried weighty undertones, expectations that the child absorbed like sunlight through fragile skin. Sibling dynamics acted as another mirror. When the older brother was praised for musical talent, the younger one felt a tug. I must be something else. Playdates became arenas of subtle rivalry, where toys and turns were bargained for like precious currency. Through these exchanges, the ego discovered that identity could be negotiated. It observed closely which traits garnered smiles and which provoked frowns. School hallways echoed with invisible scripts. A teacher's nod could plant the seed of "I am clever." A harsh reprimand watered the roots of "I am flawed." Classrooms, in their order and discipline, offered both structure and constraint. During group projects, the ego weighed the risks of speaking up versus staying silent. Art assignments revealed the heart's raw impulses. Yet the looming red pen of critique made creativity cautious. A paintbrush once held with curious abandon was later grasped with careful calculation. Each stroke measured against unseen standards carved new boundaries around self-expression. In this subtle shift, the ego tightened its grip on authenticity. Bedtime stories whispered of heroes and villains, of quests and dragons. These narratives impressed upon the child the idea of struggle and conquest. The ego listened eagerly. Strength is winning, weakness is losing. It adopted the language of competition, unaware of the cost to inner harmony. Yet in the hush of night, dreams offered glimpses of play free from antagonists. Early friendships were both balm and battlefield. A shared secret forged the bond of belonging. A broken promise sowed seeds of mistrust. These tender connections taught the ego that intimacy could be both nourishment and threat. It learned to armor itself with masks, cooperating when safe, distancing when hurt. Cultural messages filtered through television screens and storybooks. Glamorous ads whispered that happiness wore labels and brands. Fairy tales promised that transformation occurred only through external magic. Myths of separation and return planted the idea that wholeness lay elsewhere. The ego internalized these tales, believing that it must embark on quests far from home. Adolescence brought a surge of hormones and questions. What does it mean to belong? How should I look, speak, move? In lock-aligned corridors, the ego honed its performance, choosing attire and attitudes to fit shifting cliques. Each choice felt like a declaration: this is who I am. Music became an ally and a refuge. Lyrics spoke directly to the raw edge of feeling. Songs about heartbreak or rebellion mirrored the ego's inner dramas. Yet in the quiet between notes, the higher self hummed a different tune, one of belonging beyond labels. At those moments, the ego's stories faltered, revealing glimpses of a truer self. Romantic infatuations further sculpted identity. A crusher's smile became proof of worth, a rejection echoing in the hollows of self-doubt. The ego equated love with performance, good grades, witty jokes, athletic prowess. In this tender battlefield, the heart's longing shone a light on the ego's frailties. Each heartbreak cracked open the possibility of deeper compassion. By young adulthood, the mosaic of personas glittered brightly. Student, partner, the player. Each role came with expectations, implicit contracts that the ego pledged to uphold. Failure, real or imagined, cast long shadows across identity's stage. Family pressures evolved into adult obligations. Career paths beckoned with promises of stability and status. Financial independence whispered of freedom but demanded constant striving. The ego embraced these challenges, equating achievement with self-worth. Yet in quiet moments when accomplishments felt hollow, the higher self gently reminded, you are more than what you do. In crises, job loss, betrayal, illness, the ego's fortress trembled. Safety nets unraveled, revealing the fragility of externally built security. Fear roared, you are nothing without your roles. But in the raw vulnerability that followed, a new choice emerged: release or resist. Those who chose release discovered that beneath every mask lay unshakable being. Therapy, journaling, and honest conversations became tools of excavation. Each session peeled back layers of inherited beliefs, revealing surprising continuities beneath. Questions like "who am I without achievement?" cracked the ego's veneer. In the stillness after words, the soul's quiet laughter often echoed first. That laughter signaled a reunion with the child's innate freedom. Mindfulness practices shone a spotlight on habitual patterns. A moment of irritation revealed the ego's need for control. A pang of envy unveiled its hunger for validation. With each observation, the ego's grip loosened. Awareness became the chisel dismantling identity's rigid structures. Community and mentorship provided mirrors and support. Witnessing others unearth their own stories reminded the ego it was not alone in its struggle. Shared rituals, meditation circles, retreats, honest talks kindled a sense of collective awakening. In these circles, masks were gently laid down, and authentic voices emerged. Each authentic expression nourished the higher self's remembrance. Creative expression resurfaced as a path back to essence, painting without expectation, writing without judgment, dancing without choreography. In these acts of surrender, the ego transformed from critic into witness, and the soul's voice rang clear. As this chapter unfolds, notice that every moment of conditioning also contains the seeds of liberation. Each story you learned can be questioned, each belief gently examined. With compassionate awareness, the ego's edifice softens. Beneath lies the unconditioned self, timeless, boundless. In our next exploration, we will contrast this pure awareness with the mind's ceaseless chatter, revealing how to rest in witnessing rather than reacting. Hold this knowledge close. The journey inward begins with understanding where the ego started and ends with rediscovering where the self always was. From the moment we take our first breath, the seeds of identity begin to form.
In the early years of life, there is no clear distinction between self.
A baby, wide-eyed and open, experiences the world as a seamless whole, a fluid experience where love and care are both the environment and the sustenance. This unity is primal, before the distinctions between I and you are even introduced. However, as the child begins to develop cognitive abilities, the understanding of separateness slowly takes root. The first awareness of individuality comes in small bursts, when the child looks into a mirror and notices that the image staring back is their own. Yet it is not until the child starts to understand the language of the world around them, words like mine and yours, that the ego begins its subtle formation. Identity, at this point, is largely a mirror of external validation. Parents, caregivers, and the broader environment act as the first mirrors, reflecting back to the child who they are: good, bad, quiet, noisy, smart, slow. From these early experiences, the ego starts its journey of self-definition. Every compliment or criticism, every act of praise or reprimand is internalized, forming the building blocks of the self-image. The child's ego develops not in isolation, but in constant interaction with the people and world around them. Social interactions, simple playdates, sibling rivalry, or a teacher's expression of approval are early lessons in comparison, competition, and the need for external recognition. At this stage, the ego begins to understand that its existence is not just about what it does, but about how it is perceived by others. But these formative experiences are not just about receiving validation or facing criticism, they are also about survival. The child, particularly in its early stages, is highly dependent on caregivers for physical and emotional needs. In this dependency, the ego is shaped not only by desire for affection and recognition, but also by the primal instinct to avoid neglect or punishment. Through this lens, the ego begins to understand that to receive love and care, it must behave in certain ways. It learns quickly what will keep it safe, what actions, words, or behaviors attract love, and what will push others away. As the child enters school, new pressures begin to mount. Peer relationships full of camaraderie and rivalry become central to the child's sense of self-worth. In a classroom filled with other children, the ego must constantly measure up. Am I smarter, more talented, more popular? These questions become the barometers of worth, and as they are answered by external comparison, the ego gains more strength. At the same time, the ego's voice is not just born out of interactions with the outside world, but also from the inner dialogues that begin to form in the mind. The mind starts to make judgments, develop opinions, and assert preferences. I like this, I don't like that, I am good at this, I am bad at that. These internal judgments cement the ego's sense of identity, creating an ever-growing list of attributes, positive and negative, that the person believes to be true about themselves. As these patterns take root, the ego begins to attach itself to beliefs about who the child is and who they must be to survive and thrive. The ego becomes the protector, the architect of identity, shaping how the child reacts to the world and how the world reacts to them. It whispers, "This is who you are," using external feedback and internal thoughts to build a narrative that feels solid and unchanging. However, as the child matures, the ego's role becomes even more complex. Adolescence brings new layers to this self-identity, adding hormones, social pressures, and a desire for autonomy. The young person is no longer simply a reflection of others' opinions. They begin to question their place in the world, seeking answers that resonate more deeply. This period is a delicate dance between the formation of the ego and the beginning of a deeper search for the self. The ego, however, is never far behind. It continues to shape and protect the self, guiding the individual through life's challenges and transitions. But the ego's grip is not always as solid as it seems. Underneath the layers of identity, the higher self quietly watches, waiting for the moment when the individual is ready to explore the truth of who they really are, beyond the stories the ego has told. In this chapter, we have examined how the ego is born from external influences and internal desires, shaping who we believe ourselves to be. But this is only the beginning. In the next chapter, we will delve into the nature of the higher self, what it truly represents, and how it stands in contrast to the conditioned ego. For now, reflect on how the ego has shaped your own life, and begin to notice its patterns of thought and behavior. In the space between the ego and the higher self lies the possibility of transformation. The process of ego formation does not end with childhood or adolescence. Rather, it continues to evolve as we move through life, shaping the way we relate to others and to ourselves. Yet, there is a deeper dimension to this process, a dimension that remains largely unnoticed until we begin to awaken. Through the lens of spiritual awareness, we can begin to discern the unconscious patterns and beliefs that the ego has embedded within us. At first, these patterns appear as simple preferences and tendencies, the way we respond to stress, the actions we take to gain approval, or the choices we make based on fear or desire. As we grow older, the ego's narrative becomes more complex. In our 20s and 30s, we may begin to embrace the identity of the successful person, the person who has achieved goals, secured a career, or built a family. The ego loves this kind of identity. It thrives on labels like independent, accomplished, or respected. However, these labels are just that. They are constructs that do not necessarily reflect the deeper truth of who we are. The deeper truth of who we are exists beyond the ego's stories. This truth is unshaken by external circumstances and unaltered by the fluctuating tides of success and failure. In fact, the more we identify with the ego's narrative, the more we become trapped in the illusion of separation. And we start to believe that we are the sum of our accomplishments, our failures, our desires, and our fears. But this belief, though it may feel real, is just another illusion. The ego's narrative can be comforting because it offers us a sense of certainty. But that certainty is built on the shifting sands of external validation. What happens when those external sources of validation are removed? What happens when we lose our job, our status, our relationships, or our sense of control over life's circumstances? In those moments, we experience the fragility of the ego's identity. Without the constant reinforcement from the outside world, the ego begins to feel threatened, as though its very survival is at risk. This is when we begin to question who we really are, beyond the roles we've played or the labels we've worn. It is in this space of uncertainty that the invitation to awaken arises. The awakening process often begins with a feeling of dissatisfaction or discomfort. Something within us begins to stir, a longing for something more profound, something real. This yearning may take many forms: a search for purpose, a feeling of inner emptiness, or an inexplicable discontent with the way we've been living. Whatever its form, this yearning is the voice of the higher self, calling us back to the truth of who we are beyond the ego's illusions. But the ego is persistent. It will try to hold on to its stories, to maintain its grip on our sense of identity. This is why the path of awakening can feel so challenging. We must confront the ego's fear of loss, the fear of letting go of the identity that has provided us with a sense of safety and control. However, the ego's grip is not as strong as it seems. In the stillness of meditation, in the quiet moments of reflection, we begin to feel the presence of something deeper, something that was always there, beneath the surface of our conditioned mind. This is the voice of the higher self. It is the voice of truth, love, and wisdom that transcends the ego's illusions. The higher self is not an external force or a distant entity. It is an aspect of who we are, a deep well of consciousness that is always available to us if we are willing to listen. It is the part of us that sees beyond the ego's stories, beyond the surface-level identity we've constructed. In the next chapter, we will explore the nature of the higher self in more depth and begin to understand how it relates to the ego. For now, reflect on how the ego has shaped your identity throughout the various stages of your life. What are the stories you've told yourself about who you are, and what might it feel like to let go of those stories, even just for a moment? As we explore the relationship between the ego and the higher self, it's important to remember that the ego's purpose is not inherently negative. In fact, the ego plays a vital role in helping us navigate the physical world. It is the ego that helps us create structure, make decisions, and engage in relationship. Without the ego, we would lack the ability to identify with our body, express our individuality, or engage with the world around us. The ego, in its essence, is a tool for survival, a mechanism for functioning within the material world. However, the challenge arises when we become too attached to the ego, when we begin to believe that we are nothing more than the roles and identities the ego has created for us. The ego's stories built over the years become the lens through which we view ourselves and the world. This is why it's so easy to identify with the roles we play: parent, spouse, friend, worker, achiever. The ego convinces us that these roles are who we truly are. And when the roles change, when we lose a job, a relationship, or a sense of purpose, the ego feels threatened. This threat to the ego's identity can cause feelings of confusion, grief, and anxiety. In the moments when the ego is most challenged, there is an opportunity for awakening. The ego's fear of loss reveals the attachment it has to its identity. When we face loss, whether it's the end of a relationship, the loss of a job, or the breakdown of an old way of thinking, we are given the chance to confront the ego's grip on our sense of self. This confrontation can be painful, but it also opens the door to a deeper truth. It is in these moments of vulnerability that we can begin to see beyond the ego's stories, beyond the surface-level identity we've been clinging to. The deeper truth lies in the realization that we are not our thoughts, our roles, or our accomplishments. We are not defined by the titles we hold or the successes we achieve. We are, at our core, pure consciousness, awareness itself. This awareness, which lies beyond the ego, is the essence of the higher self. The journey toward reconnecting with the higher self requires letting go of the ego's need for control, recognition, and validation. It requires cultivating a deep sense of inner stillness, of surrendering to the present moment. Then, as we release our attachment to the ego's stories, we begin to discover a deeper sense of peace and clarity. This peace comes from knowing that we are not defined by external circumstances, but by our inherent connection to the infinite intelligence that flows through us. The more we cultivate this awareness, the more we begin to see the ego for what it truly is, a tool, not the master of our lives. The ego's purpose is to help us function in the world, but it is not the source of our true identity. The true identity is rooted in the higher self, which exists beyond time, space, and form. The higher self is the eternal part of us that remains untouched by the ups and downs of life. It is the part of us that knows the truth of who we are and guides us toward our highest potential. In the next chapter, we will dive deeper into the nature of the higher self, exploring how it differs from the ego and how we can begin to align ourselves with its wisdom. And now, reflect on your own relationship with the ego. How much of your sense of self is tied to external validation, roles, or accomplishments? And how might it feel to loosen your grip on these identities, to let go of the need for constant validation and recognition? The ego's grip is strong, but the higher self is always waiting, patiently, to reveal the deeper truth of who you are. In the quiet moments of reflection, in the stillness of your heart, you can begin to remember who you truly are, beyond the stories the ego has told. This is the journey of awakening, the journey toward the discovery of your higher self. And the essence of your being is not found in thoughts, emotions, or sensations. It is found in the silent space in which all mental activity arises. This ground of pure awareness is the domain of the higher self. It is unaffected by the ebb and flow of the mind's chatter. At the root of your consciousness lies a stillness that neither begins nor ends. Within this stillness, time collapses and past, present, and future merge. Here, you glimpse the eternal nature of your soul, a timeless presence that witnesses every experience without judgment. When you rest in this awareness, the illusion of separation dissolves. You sense the unity that underlies all life, The higher self perceives not as a separate I, but as an inseparable all. It is the ocean in which every individual wave is held. From this vantage point, the problems of the ego shrink to insignificance. Fears lose their urgency. Desires lose their grip. All becomes raw material for soul evolution. Your higher self holds an expansive perspective that the mind cannot fathom. It sees the long arc of your journey, lifetimes of lessons woven together. It discerns your soul's purpose beyond the confines of this single lifetime. No choice is wasted, no moment is meaningless. In contrast, the mind leaps from thought to thought, creating stories of lack and limitation. It mistakes these stories for reality. But the higher self knows the truth beneath the narrative. This truth is freedom, unconditional love, and innate worthiness. Imagine a vast sky with clouds drifting across its surface. The clouds are thoughts, ever-changing and ephemeral. The sky is your higher self, unchanging, boundless, and ever-present. No matter how dense the clouds, the sky remains untouched. From the perspective of the higher self, you are both actor and witness. You participate in the drama of life, yet you stand apart as the observer. This dual role liberates you from total identification with any single role or emotion. You become the spacious presence in which life unfolds. Accessing this state requires shifting attention from content to context. Instead of following each thought, you rest in the awareness that holds them. In that rest, the higher self speaks in whisper-soft nudges. Guidance arrives as clarity, compassion, and courage. As you cultivate this inner relationship, the mind's demands soften. You no longer need to fix every problem or predict every outcome. You trust the flow of life as an expression of divine intelligence, and surrender becomes your greatest ally. In this space of pure awareness, creativity and inspiration burgeon. Solutions to long-standing challenges emerge effortlessly. Joy and gratitude arise unbidden, transforming ordinary moments into sacred ones. You rediscover wonder in the simplest experiences. In the silent core of your being, a reservoir of unconditional love waits to be felt. This love is not earned or deserved. It simply is. It flows without discrimination, embracing every thought, emotion, and sensation. Here, compassion arises naturally for yourself and for all beings. Boundless creativity also springs from this source. Ideas emerge as if from nowhere, bursting forth in inspired clarity. This is the wellspring of innovation that transcends logic and intention. When you rest in presence, creative solutions arise spontaneously. Clarity dawns without effort. Decisions that once felt paralyzing become simple and obvious. The higher self sees outcomes in terms of alignment rather than consequence. It feels the direction of your soul's growth rather than the ego's immediate gain. A sense of deep peace permeates every breath. Stress dissolves in the awareness that you are held by something greater. Even amidst turmoil, you can touch that still point at the center. Anchored in presence, you become unshaken by external storms. Intuition speaks in quiet tones. It arrives as a knowing that bypasses reasoning. In these moments, the mind's chatter fades into the background. You feel a gentle pull toward what is true for you. Synchronicities multiply when you live from this place. Where chance encounters carry potent messages. Opportunities appear in perfect timing, as though orchestrated by invisible hands. Each synchronicity confirms your alignment with the infinite field of intelligence. Generosity flows effortlessly through your actions. You give without expectation of return. Service becomes its own reward. In this open-hearted space, barriers between self and other collapse. The higher self sees challenges as invitations. Every obstacle carries a hidden gem of wisdom. Pain becomes a teacher rather than a prison. Through hardship, the soul's resilience is revealed. Freedom in this realm is not license to do anything, but permission to be anything. You are liberated from limiting beliefs, from the weight of expectations, from the tight grip of should and shouldn't. Boundaries soften and expand. Connection replaces containment. You begin to sense the unity of all life. Each heartbeat resonates with the pulse of Gaia. Time itself becomes fluid. Past and future dissolve into the richness of now. Memory blends with vision in a tapestry of soul remembrance. Keys. In timeless presence, destiny and free will dance in harmony. The higher self speaks in metaphor and symbol as much as in direct knowing. Dreams carry archetypal messages. Symbols in nature point to deeper truths. Inal. Animal totems, recurring images, and intuitive flashes all guide the way. As you deepen your relationship with this inner presence, you shed old patterns with grace. Habits that once controlled you lose their power. Old wounds transform into portals of healing. The light of awareness transmutes shadows into gold. Community becomes a reflection of shared awakening. Like-hearted souls gather, drawn by the resonance of truth. Together you amplify the frequency of love and presence. Your collective intention co-creates a field of healing for all. Service and purpose align seamlessly. Work becomes a channel for soul expression rather than a mere task. Daily life turns into a prayer in motion. Every conversation, every choice carries the imprint of sacred intention. In moments of doubt, return to simple awareness. Feel the aliveness in your body. Notice the space around your thoughts. Breathe into the vastness that holds you. Remember that the ego may still speak loudly. It will try to reclaim its former authority. Yet each time you choose presence over reaction, its voice weakens. Consistency builds momentum for true transformation. Cultivating daily rituals fortifies your connection. 10 minutes of silent meditation. A short gratitude practice upon waking. Moments of mindful breathing throughout the day. Creativity too becomes a sacred act. Writing a poem, painting a canvas, or crafting a melody can channel soul wisdom. In these expressions, the higher self speaks through form. Art becomes prayer, and prayer becomes life. Each time you honor this inner presence, you deepen trust. You learn to lean into uncertainty with faith, to move forward without knowing every detail, to follow the whispers of guidance. This path is not always smooth. Resistance may arise. Old wounds may surface as fear or doubt. When this happens, lean into the vulnerability. Allow the higher self's love to cradle the pain. Gradually, you discover that your identity is not confined to a single role or story. You are the witness, the actor, and the space in which all unfolds. In this integrated state, life flows with fluidity and purpose. You dance with the ever-changing currents of existence. Defensiveness often arises before we even realize it. A slight criticism sends the heart racing and the mind gearing up for battle. In that split second, the ego seeks to protect its constructed identity. It whispers, "You must prove yourself right," and so you argue, justify, or retreat behind walls of silence. Comparison colors our perception like a tinted lens. You notice another's success and instantly measure your own worth. A friend's promotion becomes evidence of your own lack. The ego delights in ranking, classifying, and sorting. It thrives on the belief that value is relative. Fear-based thinking tightens the chest and constricts the mind. "What if I fail?" becomes a mantra that echoes in every decision. Imagined catastrophes play on loop, fueling anxiety. The higher self, in contrast, steps back with curiosity, witnessing the fear without buying into it. Needing to be right masks deeper insecurities. Every conversation turns into a contest to be won. The ego demands validation through conviction. Even when the truth lies in a middle ground, the ego clings to extremes. It fears ambiguity and craves certainty. Blame arises as a reflex when outcomes disappoint. Someone or something outside becomes the scapegoat. "You can't succeed because, or they made me feel," become the ego's alibis. Personal responsibility vanishes behind a curtain of excuses. The higher self, conversely, asks, "What can I learn?" rather than "Who is at fault?" Attachment to outcomes fuels suffering. When things go as planned, joy flickers but never stays. When they don't, despair floods in. The ego's grip on how things should be blinds us to what is. Acceptance arises in the higher self's domain, where flow replaces force. Identification with roles narrows perception. Mother, manager, expert, these titles become prisons when given too much weight. You begin to believe that without the role you do not exist. The ego rigidly defends its roles against any perceived threat. Yet the higher self simply witnesses the roles as temporary masks. And constant comparison on social media steals presence. Scrolling through curated perfection awakens envy. The ego desires applause, likes, and shares as proof of its value. Yet each scroll disconnects us further from our own center. In stillness, the higher self reminds us that worth is inherent, not manufactured. Self-criticism is a silent tyrant within. And silent. Self-criticism is a silent tyrant within. I'm not good enough, I should be better, I failed again. These judgments carve grooves in the psyche, reinforcing shame. The ego wields criticism as a tool for control. And the higher self holds compassion, soothing every wound with gentleness. Resistance to change signals clinging to the known. Even when the known is painful, the ego prefers its familiar ache. And transformation feels threatening because it threatens the ego's story. Yet the higher self invites evolution as a natural unfolding of the soul. And building of the soul. And gossip and judgment of others reveal an inner wound. When you point fingers, the ego hides behind moral superiority. Each harsh word reflects the shadow cast within your own heart. The higher self spills no gossip, it holds space for every being's journey. And perfectionism is the ego's fortress. It demands flawless performance to feel worthy. Mistakes become intolerable, and creativity chokes under pressure. The higher self, however, celebrates imperfection as the ground of growth. And constant busyness numbs the ego's fears. And tasks, errands, and endless planning fill the void of presence. The ego equates activity with worth. In silence, the higher self reveals that being is greater than doing. Seeking external validation is a hallmark of ego. And praise from peers bolsters the ego's confidence but leaves a hollow core. True validation arises from the higher self's deep knowing, you are already whole. And clinging to opinions seals off open-mindedness. When you know you poison curiosity and empathy, the ego fights to defend its views as if they were its life. The higher self remains open, receptive to ever-unfolding truth. And the fear of solitude drives the ego to constant connection. And it dreads silent retreats, long drives alone, moments without distraction. And bursts. In the quiet, its anxious whispers grow loud. But the higher self rests peacefully in alone time, finding companionship in presence. Attachment to the past and future creates distress. Regret for yesterday and worry for tomorrow chain the ego to illusion. And the higher self sanctifies the present where life truly unfolds. Emotional reactivity reveals ego's dominance. And an unexpected comment triggers anger or hurt. The ego reacts like a wounded animal, seeking defense. The higher self pauses, observes the emotion, and responds with discernment. And inattention to bodily signals fuels disconnection. Ignoring hunger, fatigue, or tension perpetuates mechanical living. The ego dismisses the body as irrelevant. And the higher self listens to the body's wisdom, honoring its messages. And the relentless inner dialogue keeps you trapped in thought. The ego never stops narrating, analyzing, and replaying. And that noise presence fades. And the higher self invites silence where pure awareness reigns. And when you catch yourself caught in these patterns, you glimpse the ego's reign. And with each moment of noticing, the witness, the higher self, grows stronger. Awareness of these signs is the first step toward choosing presence over projection. And in that choice, freedom dawns. Perfectionism whispers that every action must be flawless to prove your worth. When mistakes arise, shame floods the mind, and you retreat deeper into self-criticism. Your inner judge grows louder than any supportive voice, demanding you perform without error. The higher self, however, welcomes imperfection as the doorway to growth and compassion. A sense of scarcity clouds your perception of abundance all around you. You believe there's not enough time, money, love for everyone to thrive. This scarcity mindset drives competition and fear, fueling comparisons with others. By contrast, the higher self recognizes infinite possibility and cultivates a wealth of generosity. Judgment of your own body and appearance signals ego's control over self-image. When you fixate on flaws, you forget the living miracle that you truly are. The ego tightens its grip through diet extremes and relentless self-surveillance. The higher self celebrates the body as sacred temple worthy of love in every form. Resentment simmers when expectations go unmet. Others should act differently. You hold on to grievances like treasures, nursing a sense of deservedness. The ego uses resentment to justify separation and feed its wounded pride. The higher self practices forgiveness as a release valve for your own liberation. Busyness masks a fear of facing stillness within. You fill every minute with tasks to avoid uncomfortable feelings and self-reflection. The ego equates achievement with identity and fear with emptiness. The higher self honors downtime as essential nourishment for clarity and presence. Over-planning seeks to control future outcomes so uncertainty feels safe. The rigid itinerary comforts the anxious ego that fears surprises, yet unforeseen detours often reveal new paths the mind could not foresee. The higher self flows with spontaneity and trusts the wisdom of the present moment. The emotional dependency arises when you seek approval as validation of your existence. The compliments feel like lifelines. Criticisms threaten the ego's survival instincts. In this dance, your identity sways with every external opinion. The higher self stands steady, knowing your true value is inherent and unchanging. Distraction becomes an addiction to avoid the vulnerability of feeling. Scrolling, binge-watching, busily cleaning, all tactics to numb the heart's whispers. The ego fears stillness because silence exposes its illusions. The higher self invites you into silence where soul's voice resonates clearly. Deflection of praise springs from discomfort in accepting genuine kindness. When others recognize your gifts, the ego questions why me. Embracing praise threatens the old story of unworthiness. The higher self receives kindness with open arms, acknowledging everyone's light. The higher self receives kindness with open arms, acknowledging everyone's light. The fierceness, constant need to win arguments reveals ego's hunger for superiority. Dialogue becomes a battlefield where you defend the fortress of opinion. Learning ceases when victory matters more than truth. The higher self engages in conversation as exploration, not conquest. Projection of your own fears onto others shows ego's blind spots. You accuse, blame, or criticize traits you refuse to see in yourself. In these reflections, the mind hides its own shadows behind the lens of blame. The higher self turns gently inward, transforming projections into self-awareness. The hyper-control of people or circumstances masks anxiety about uncertainty. The higher self turns gently inward, transforming projections into self-awareness. The resistance arises when plans deviate from script. The higher self surrenders control, embracing life's natural unfolding. The judging others as less than feeds ego's superiority complex. You erect illusions of difference to shore up your own fragile self-image. You erect illusions of difference to shore up your own fragile self-image. Yet beneath such judgments lies a tender wound yearning for compassion. The higher self recognizes every being as a spark of the same divine flame. The fixation on material possessions promises status but breeds attachment. The collecting things becomes a way to fill an inner void. Yet possessions can be lost in a moment, revealing their fleeting value. The higher self treasures experiences over objects, knowing that joy flows from presence. The repression of emotions creates an inner pressure cooker of tension. The bottling up anger, sadness, or fear leads to eventual eruption or numbing. The ego fears vulnerability as weakness and resists honest feeling. The higher self welcomes every emotion with an open heart, allowing it to move through you. The excessive self-analysis traps you in loops of rumination. The overthinking every motive and meaning drains energy from living. The ego lulls you into believing that constant mental activity equals progress. The higher self invites direct experience over endless conceptualization. The fear of failure keeps you stuck in safe but uninspired routines. The ego defines identity through success metrics and punishes risk with self-doubt. Yet failure often reveals hidden strengths and fresh perspectives. The higher self embraces failure as a sacred teacher on the path of growth. The clinging to nostalgia anchors you in the past, blocking new possibilities. You romanticize better days, longing for a time that can never return. The ego fears the unknown so fiercely that it retreats into memory. The higher self invites you to live fully in the present, where creation unfolds moment by moment. When you catch these patterns arising, pause and breathe. Naming the ego's habits weakens their power. The Each moment of awareness is a victory for presence. In this conscious choice, you step into the freedom of your higher self. A relentless inner critic speaks in a loop of not enough. It highlights every flaw and downplays every achievement. The ego uses this critique to keep you chasing ever higher standards. By contrast, the higher self offers gentle encouragement, celebrating every step forward. Overwhelm can be a sign of ego-driven multitasking. You juggle projects, emails, and responsibilities to prove your capability. Yet fragmentation of attention breeds stress and burnout. The higher self reminds you to focus on one heartfelt task at a time, infusing it with full presence. Chasing success at the cost of health reveals misaligned priorities. Late nights, skipped meals, and neglected rest become badges of dedication. Your body signals its disapproval through aches and fatigue. The higher self honors the body's wisdom, weaving balance between action and restoration. Emotional hijacking occurs when a small trigger sends you into a disproportionately large reaction. In that moment, the ego's survival alarm blares, demanding immediate defense. Rational thought goes offline as you're swept into drama. The higher self holds calm space, allowing the emotion to pass without escalation. Clinging to drama fuels the ego's need for significance. You find yourself drawn to conflict, real or imagined, to feel alive. Each story of insult or injustice becomes a stage for the ego's performance. The higher self chooses peace over drama, opting for harmony in all exchanges. Perpetual restlessness hints that the ego cannot sit still in contentment. Wandering from place to place, thought to thought, relationship to relationship, no situation feels right long enough before the mind seeks the next. The higher self anchors you in the joy of here and now, dissolving the itch to endlessly search. Rigid beliefs close you off from new perspectives. You hold opinions as if they were sacred truths. Discussion becomes confrontation rather than discovery. The higher self remains curious, open to learning in every encounter. The higher self remains curious, open to learning in every encounter. Withholding generosity reveals stinginess of ego. You count your resources, time, money, attention, as limited commodities. Giving feels risky, as if your survival depends on hoarding. The higher self flows abundantly, trusting in the cycle of give and receive. Seeking certainty in uncertain realms is a hallmark of ego. You demand plans, guarantees, and proof before stepping forward. Yet life's greatest gifts arrive unannounced. The higher self leaps with faith into the mystery, guided by inner knowing rather than external assurances. Excessive comparison to past versions of yourself fuels dissatisfaction. I used to be more energetic, I was once more confident, become endless refrains. The ego clings to nostalgia for an idealized self. The higher self embraces growth, honoring who you were, who you are, and who you're becoming. Preoccupation with reputation breeds inauthenticity. Every word and action is filtered to protect how you're seen. This performance cages your true expression. The higher self dissolves masks, trusting that authenticity radiates true connection. Fear of judgment immobilizes you from sharing your gifts. Ideas remain hidden, talents unexpressed, dreams unvoiced. The ego whispers, "What if they laugh?" The higher self urges, "Your voice matters," and encourages courageous self-expression. Clinging to comfort zones stunts personal evolution. Change feels threatening, so you retreat to familiarity. Yet growth lies just beyond the edge of discomfort. The higher self gently nudges you toward new horizons, offering support in the unknown. When ego's signs arise, you have a choice: react unconsciously or choose presence. Naming the pattern, this is fear speaking, creates space for freedom. Each act of self-observation diminishes the ego's hold. And each conscious choice strengthens the voice of your higher self within. Living in alignment with your higher self feels like stepping into a flowing river of peace. It's an experience of deep inner harmony, where every action, thought, and emotion aligns with your true nature. Rather than striving against the current of life, you move effortlessly with it. In this state, you trust that every step is guided by a wisdom far greater than your individual mind. At the core of alignment lies peace. This peace is not passive, nor is it the absence of challenge. It is a deep, unwavering calm that persists despite external circumstances. When you are aligned with your higher self, external turbulence can pass through you without disrupting your center. You may feel sadness, joy, or frustration, but these emotions don't control you. They arise, they are felt, and they pass, like waves on the ocean. Clarity becomes a natural byproduct of alignment. The world no longer feels confusing, filled with decisions and distractions. Instead, clarity emerges like a bright light cutting through fog, allowing you to see the next step clearly. You know when to act, when to wait, and when to let go. There's no hesitation because you trust the flow of life. You have the clarity to see your path, and you move forward with conviction. Flow is another sign of alignment. When you are in alignment with your higher self, tasks that once seemed daunting feel effortless. Work, relationships, and personal pursuits all seem to flow with ease and joy. Time may expand or contract, but you don't feel the weight of it. Instead, you are fully present in every moment, enjoying the journey rather than rushing toward an end goal. Another sign of alignment is the sense of being deeply connected to others. When you live in harmony with your higher self, relationships become a source of nourishment and support. You no longer feel the need to compete, compare, or protect your interests. You give freely, love deeply, and receive without resistance. In this state, you feel a profound sense of oneness with everyone you encounter. Each person is seen as an extension of yourself, and there's no separation between you and them. When you are aligned, you are also living with purpose. Purpose isn't something you need to chase or define through external measures. Instead, it arises naturally as you live authentically and true to your inner guidance. Your actions are fueled by a sense of deep meaning, and every moment becomes an expression of your soul's highest calling. Gratitude is another powerful marker of alignment. You cultivate a deep sense of gratitude for both the small and the big things in life. You find joy in the simple moments, a warm cup of tea, a beautiful sunset, the sound of laughter. This gratitude isn't a forced practice, it flows naturally from your heart. And as you express gratitude, more blessings come your way, because gratitude is a powerful magnet for abundance. There is a sense of inner freedom when you are aligned with your higher self. Freedom isn't about external circumstances, freedom is a state of being. You are free from the constraints of fear, judgment, and the need to control. You no longer feel the need to prove yourself or gain external validation. You are free to be yourself, whole, authentic, and unashamed. Living in alignment with your higher self brings you a deep sense of love. Love is no longer something you seek externally, but a wellspring that rises from within. It permeates every aspect of your life, your thoughts, your actions, and your interactions. This love isn't bound by conditions or expectations. It is pure and unconditional, flowing freely without reserve. You recognize love as the essence of who you truly are. This alignment also gives rise to a deep sense of trust in life. When you trust your higher self, you trust the unfolding of life itself. You know that everything is working for your highest good, even if you don't understand the path at the moment. You trust that all the twists and turns, the challenges and triumphs, are part of the divine plan. This trust allows you to release the need to control outcomes and simply be. Ultimately, alignment with your higher self means living in accordance with your soul's true nature. It means embracing your authentic self, flaws and all, and walking your unique path with courage and grace. It means being at peace with who you are and where you are, knowing that you are exactly where you need to be. In this state of alignment, life is no longer something you need to fix or force. Instead, it becomes a beautiful unfolding, a dance with the universe itself. When you are aligned with your higher self, you experience a deep sense of inner coherence. This coherence is the opposite of internal conflict, where your actions and beliefs are out of sync. Instead, there is harmony between your thoughts, words, and deeds. You act in alignment with your values, and every decision is grounded in truth. This coherence becomes a compass that guides you through the complexities of life. In alignment, there is an undeniable sense of wholeness. You no longer feel fragmented, pulled in multiple directions by external forces or internal doubts. You are able to integrate all parts of yourself, your shadow, your strengths, your vulnerabilities, and your wisdom into a unified whole. Wholeness is not perfection, it's the acceptance and integration of all that you are. From this place of wholeness, you are free to express your true self without fear of judgment. As you align with your higher self, you also begin to notice a sense of effortless manifestation in your life. When you are in harmony with your true nature, the universe begins to support you in miraculous ways. Opportunities, resources, and people come into your life at just the right time, almost as if by magic. This isn't because you are trying to force things to happen, it's because you are in the flow of divine timing. Your alignment acts like a magnet, drawing to you the circumstances and people that resonate with your vibration. Along with manifestation, alignment brings a profound sense of joy. This joy isn't the fleeting happiness that comes from external success or temporary pleasures. It is a deep, intrinsic joy that arises from living authentically, from being true to yourself. This joy is not dependent on any specific outcome. It comes from within. It radiates outward, touching every aspect of your life. Another powerful indicator of alignment is the feeling of being at peace with uncertainty. When you are aligned with your higher self, you are no longer trying to control every aspect of your life. You are at peace with the unknown, knowing that the future will unfold exactly as it is meant to. This peace allows you to move through life with grace, even when things don't go according to plan. You trust that every experience is an opportunity for growth, and you welcome it with open arms. A significant sign of alignment is the natural desire to serve others. When you are aligned with your higher self, you feel a deep sense of compassion and empathy for others. You are motivated not by ego-driven desires for recognition or gain, but by a genuine desire to help and uplift those around you. Service comes from a place of abundance, not scarcity, because you know that there is always more than enough to give. In helping others, you find fulfillment and joy, as serving others is an expression of your true nature. When you live in alignment, you also become more attuned to your intuition. Your intuition is the voice of your higher self, guiding you toward your highest potential. You may notice that your gut feelings become sharper, your inner knowing becomes clearer, and you trust your instincts more readily. This intuitive guidance becomes a reliable compass, leading you through life with confidence and certainty. Another key indicator of alignment is the feeling of being fully present in the moment. When you are aligned with your higher self, you are no longer lost in the past or worrying about the future. You are fully immersed in the present, experiencing life as it unfolds in real time. This presence brings a deep sense of peace and joy, as you are no longer distracted by the noise of your mind or external pressures. You are free to simply be, allowing life to unfold naturally and effortlessly. Living in alignment with your higher self means embracing your full potential. You no longer shrink back from challenges or play small in the face of opportunities. Instead, you step into your greatness, confident in your abilities and in the divine support that surrounds you. You trust that you are capable of achieving your dreams, and you take inspired action toward them without fear or doubt. Finally, alignment with your higher self brings an overwhelming sense of gratitude. You recognize the beauty and wonder in every moment, no matter how small. You are deeply grateful for the present moment, for the lessons, and for the opportunities that life presents. This gratitude creates a ripple effect, attracting even more blessings into your life. In alignment, you realize that everything is a gift, and you are deeply thankful for the life you have. When you are aligned with your higher self, you naturally begin to experience a sense of connectedness to all of life. You feel as though you are not separate from the world around you, but an integral part of it, interconnected with all beings, nature, and the universe itself. This sense of oneness dissolves the illusion of separateness that the ego fosters and opens you up to a deeper, more profound connection with everything that is. You begin to recognize that all experiences, no matter how challenging, are opportunities for growth and expansion, for they are part of the same universal fabric that you are woven into. As your alignment deepens, you may notice that your relationships become more meaningful, and and harmonious. You are no longer drawn to toxic dynamics or superficial connections. Instead, you attract people who resonate with your vibration, individuals who support your highest good and share in your growth journey. Your relationships are now based on authenticity, love, and mutual respect. You recognize the divine essence in others, and this allows you to relate to them in a way that is free from judgment or expectation. In alignment with your higher self, you also experience a deep sense of freedom. This freedom is not just from external constraints, but from the internal limitations that the ego imposes. You are no longer bound by fear, doubt, or the need for validation. You are free to express yourself fully, to pursue your passions, and to create the life you truly desire. This freedom brings an overwhelming sense of peace, for you no longer feel as though you are at war with yourself or the world. Another powerful sign that you are in alignment is the sense of flow that permeates your life. When you are aligned with your higher self, you no longer feel as though you are forcing or striving to make things happen. Instead, life begins to unfold effortlessly, as if you are simply riding the current of your soul's purpose. You trust in divine timing and know that everything is unfolding as it should. This state of flow allows you to make decisions with ease, to take inspired action, and to embrace challenges as opportunities for growth rather than obstacles. In alignment with your higher self, your purpose becomes crystal clear. You no longer feel lost or unsure of your direction. Instead, you have a deep knowing of what you are meant to do in this lifetime, and you are committed to fulfilling that purpose with love and passion. Your purpose may evolve over time, but in each moment, you are aligned with the essence of your soul's calling. This clarity gives you a sense of direction and focus, and you are able to move forward with confidence and determination. One of the most profound signs of alignment is the unwavering sense of trust in yourself and the universe. When you are aligned, you trust your inner wisdom, knowing that you have the answers within you. You no longer rely on external validation or the opinions of others to make decisions. Instead, you listen to your inner guidance and trust that it will always lead you toward what is best for you. You also trust that the universe has your back, that everything is happening for your highest good, even if it doesn't always seem that way in the moment. Living in alignment with your higher self also means embracing a life of service and contribution. When you are connected to your soul, you naturally feel a desire to give back, to make the world a better place, and to help others awaken to their own truth. This service is not driven by a need for recognition or reward, but by a deep sense of love and compassion. You give freely, knowing that by doing so you are contributing to the collective awakening and growth of humanity. Your service may take many forms, helping others heal, sharing your knowledge, or simply being present and offering love. Finally, the most profound sign that you are aligned with your higher self is the deep, unshakable peace that permeates every aspect of your life. This peace is not a fleeting sensation, but a constant undercurrent that remains steady even in the midst of life's storms. It is the peace that comes from knowing that you are exactly where you need to be, doing exactly what you are meant to do. This peace allows you to navigate life with grace and ease, no matter what challenges arise. It is the peace that arises from being in full alignment with your soul's purpose and with the divine flow of the universe. Living in alignment with your higher self is not a destination, but a continuous journey. It is a journey of deepening self-awareness, of shedding the layers of the ego, and of embracing your true nature. As you continue on this path, the signs of alignment will become more and more apparent, guiding you toward a life of authenticity, peace, and purpose. And as you live in alignment, you will begin to witness the transformation not only in your own life, but in the world around you. This is the beauty of living as your higher self, being a beacon of light and love, showing others the way back to their own truth. Ego death is often spoken of as a sacred and transformative experience, one that many seek, but few truly understand. It is a process of letting go of the false identities and self-concepts that the ego has carefully constructed over a lifetime. When we talk about ego death, we are not referring to the literal death of the ego itself, but rather to the death of the illusions the ego creates. Ego is, in essence, the mind's story of who we are, our self-image, our role in the world, our fears and desires. However, this identity is not our true nature. The true self exists beyond these mental constructs, beyond the labels and stories we've attached to ourselves. To experience ego death is to shed these layers of illusion, allowing us to step into the pure, unchanging awareness that resides within us. This process can be incredibly challenging, as it requires us to confront the very aspects of ourselves that we have been conditioned to hold onto for a sense of security and identity. The ego resists this letting go, for it thrives on control, separation, and fear. When the ego begins to unravel, it feels as though the foundation of who we are is crumbling, and this can bring about profound fear and confusion. Yet in the midst of this disintegration, there is also the potential for profound awakening. The ego death is not something to be feared, it is a necessary step towards spiritual awakening and enlightenment. When we are no longer attached to our egoic identity, we free ourselves from the limitations that it imposes on us. We are no longer defined by our past, our mistakes, our accomplishments, or our external circumstances. We are simply beings of pure awareness connected to the greater consciousness that flows through all things. This state of awareness is the birthplace of true freedom, for it is only in letting go of the egoic mind that we can truly experience the fullness of our being. The process of ego death often begins with a deep crisis or a sense of disillusionment with life. Many people who undergo ego death report feeling as though their entire world has been turned upside down. Their old ways of thinking, being, and relating to the world no longer feel authentic or fulfilling. This crisis can take many forms: emotional turmoil, spiritual discontent, a deep sense of loss, or a sudden realization that the material pursuits they've been chasing do not bring lasting happiness. For some, this crisis is triggered by a profound life event, such as the death of a loved one, a serious illness, or the end of a relationship. For others, it is a slow, gradual process of awakening, where they begin to question the very nature of their reality and their purpose in life. At first, the experience of ego death can feel like a form of psychological suffering. The ego, which has been our primary source of identity and security, begins to lose its grip on us, and we are left feeling lost and vulnerable. The fear of losing ourselves, of ceasing to exist as we've known ourselves to be, can be overwhelming. However, as we continue through the process, we begin to realize that what we feared losing was never truly who we are in the first place. The person we believed ourselves to be, the story we told ourselves about who we are, was just that, a story. As the ego dissolves, we start to experience a shift in perception. We begin to see ourselves and the world around us in a new light, free from the filters of judgment, fear, and attachment that the ego had placed upon us. This new way of seeing is often described as a state of heightened awareness or expanded consciousness. It is as though the veil has been lifted and we can now perceive reality as it truly is, beyond the illusions of separation and duality that the ego creates. In this state of expanded awareness, we begin to experience a deep sense of oneness with all of life. We no longer see ourselves as separate from others or from the world around us. We recognize that we are all part of the same divine consciousness, interconnected and interdependent. This realization brings a profound sense of peace and clarity, for we no longer feel as though we need to struggle or fight against life. We are simply flowing with the current of existence, trusting that everything is unfolding as it should. As we move through the ego death process, we may also begin to experience a sense of liberation from the fears and anxieties that once controlled us. The ego is driven by fear, fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of not being enough. But as we let go of the ego's control, we also release these fears. We come to understand that fear is just another illusion created by the mind, and that it has no real power over us. We begin to step into our true power, free from the constraints of fear and doubt. The journey of ego death is not always smooth. It requires great courage and surrender to face the parts of ourselves that we have spent our entire lives hiding from. But in the end, it is through this process of letting go that we can truly awaken to who we are. Ego death is not the end, it is the beginning of a new chapter, one in which we are free to live as our true, authentic selves. Once the ego has begun its dissolution, a shift takes place in our perception of the world and ourselves. The process of awakening can feel like a sudden burst of clarity, or it may come in waves, gradually pulling us deeper into a state of awareness. It's a feeling of being free from the constraints of the past, free from the mental chatter that once controlled our every thought and action. And yet, there's a paradox. While we may feel liberated, we also feel deeply humbled. The ego often operates from a place of pride and arrogance, believing that it is the source of our strength and wisdom. But, in the wake of ego death, we are confronted with the truth that we are not the doers, the controllers, or the architects of our reality. We are conduits of something far greater than ourselves, and this realization brings a sense of awe and surrender. In this new state, we may find ourselves questioning everything we once held dear, including our beliefs, our attachments, and our desires. The old patterns of behavior that were once second nature may begin to dissolve, leaving us feeling disoriented or uncertain. But, at first, this can feel unsettling, as if the ground beneath our feet has shifted. But, as we move through the experience, we realize that this uncertainty is simply the ego's fear of losing control. But, in truth, there is nothing to fear, for the new self that is emerging is not bound by the constraints of the old egoic identity. The state of awakening is often accompanied by profound feelings of peace and clarity. These feelings arise because in the absence of the ego we are able to experience life as it truly is, unfiltered and pure. There is no longer a constant inner dialogue telling us who we should be or what we should do. In this stillness, we begin to feel a deep sense of connection to everything around us, the people we encounter, the nature we observe, the energy that flows through all things. The barriers that the ego once erected between ourselves and the world around us begin to dissolve. But we realize that we are not separate from anything. We are part of the same unified consciousness that permeates all of existence. This recognition of oneness is one of the hallmarks of ego death. No longer do we see ourselves as isolated individuals, separate from others, or from the universe itself. Instead, we experience a profound sense of interconnectedness, an awareness that we are all expressions of the same divine energy. This realization brings a deep sense of compassion and love for all beings, for we understand that their struggles are our struggles, their joy is our joy. When we move through life from this place of interconnectedness, we experience a deep sense of purpose and meaning in everything we do. Every action, every interaction, becomes an opportunity to express love and compassion, and to contribute to the collective awakening of humanity. In the process of ego death, we may also encounter moments of intense fear and resistance. This fear arises because the ego is terrified of losing its grip on us. It may attempt to reassert control, using strategies such as self-doubt, guilt, and anxiety. But these fears are not the truth. They are simply remnants of the ego trying to hold on to its illusion of control. As we continue to surrender, we begin to recognize these fears for what they are: thoughts that arise in the mind, but not the truth of our being. The more we trust in the process of awakening, the more we are able to let go of these fears and move forward with grace. It's important to understand that ego death is not a one-time event. It is an ongoing process of transformation and awakening. Even after we have experienced the dissolution of the ego to some degree, there may still be layers of attachment or conditioning that need to be released. The ego is a clever creature, and it will often try to sneak back in through subtle ways, through pride, judgment, or the desire for validation. But with each layer that we shed, we become more and more aligned with our true nature. We begin to live from a place of authenticity, expressing the essence of who we are in every thought, word, and action. This is the beauty of the ego death process. It is not about eradicating the ego or rejecting the mind. Rather, it is about integrating the ego into our higher self, transforming it from an obstacle into an ally. As we become more aligned with our true essence, the ego becomes a tool for navigating the world, but it no longer dictates our sense of self-worth or determines our actions. Instead, we are guided by the wisdom of our higher self, living with compassion, clarity, and presence. The journey of ego death is ultimately a journey of awakening to our divine nature. It is a process of letting go of the illusions and attachments that bind us to the material world, and stepping into the infinite potential of our true selves. Through this process, we are freed from the limitations of the ego, and we come to know ourselves as the beings of love, light, and consciousness that we truly are. As we continue to move through the journey of ego death and awakening, a crucial realization begins to emerge. The ego does not simply disappear. Rather, instead of being an opposing force, the ego evolves into something more harmonious. integrated into our being without dictating our every move. It's as if the ego, once a separate and often destructive force, now serves as a tool for our highest good, helping us navigate the world in a balanced way. But this integration is not something that happens overnight. It requires patience, ongoing self-awareness, and a willingness to embrace both the light and the shadow aspects of our being. There will be moments when the ego tries to reassert itself, when fear, judgment, and pride begin to cloud our thoughts. It's important to remember that this is part of the process, not a failure. The key is to recognize these moments with compassion, not judgment, and to gently return to our center. As the ego softens and transforms, the space between our thoughts begins to widen. This space is sacred. It is the space where our higher self speaks to us. It is in this space that we experience moments of stillness, clarity, and peace that are not clouded by the noise of the mind. The more we cultivate this inner space, the more we can hear the whispers of our higher self. It's here that we begin to experience the depth of our true nature, the truth that we are not defined by the labels, roles, or identities that the ego once held dear. We are eternal consciousness, and this realization is the foundation of true freedom. This awakening brings with it a sense of clarity about our purpose in life. No longer are we driven by the need for validation, success, or recognition. Instead, we begin to live in alignment with our soul's purpose, doing what we love simply because it brings us joy and fulfillment. The ego, which once pushed us to seek external rewards, no longer dictates our actions. Instead, we are guided by an inner compass that leads us toward love, service, and authenticity. We begin to recognize that our purpose is not something we must find, but something we must allow to unfold from within. And as we step into this truth, we become more and more aligned with the flow of life, experiencing a sense of ease and grace that comes from living in harmony with the universe. At the same time, the ego's transformation also brings a heightened sense of compassion and empathy for others. When we no longer see ourselves as separate from others, when we realize that their pain is our pain, their joy is our joy, we naturally begin to act with more kindness and understanding. The walls of judgment that the ego once erected between us and the world start to crumble. In their place, we experience a deep sense of connection to all beings, recognizing that we are all expressions of the same divine source. This compassion extends not only to others but also to ourselves. In the past, the ego might have demanded perfection, harshly criticizing us for every mistake. But now, as the ego transforms, we become more forgiving of ourselves. We recognize that we are all on a journey, and every step, whether it's a step forward or a stumble, is part of the process of growth. The pressure to be perfect dissolves, and we find peace in the simple act of being. As we continue to integrate the wisdom of our higher self, we begin to experience the world in a new way. The external world, once seen through the lens of ego, is now viewed through the lens of love and unity. Instead of seeing others as competitors or threats, we begin to see them as fellow travelers on the same journey. We no longer feel the need to defend ourselves or assert our superiority, for we understand that we are all equal expressions of the divine. This shift in perception is one of the most profound effects of ego death. It allows us to experience the world with more grace, acceptance, and joy. In the end, ego death is not the end of the ego itself, but the end of the ego's dominance over our lives. It is the transformation of the ego from a tyrant into a servant, from a source of fear and separation into a tool for self-expression and growth. When we move through life with an integrated ego, guided by our higher self, we experience true freedom. This is the essence of ego death, not the annihilation of the self, but the liberation of the self from the illusions that once confined it. In this space of liberation, we find our true power, not in the ego's need for control, but in the infinite love and wisdom of our higher self. In our exploration of ego death, we've come to understand that it's not about annihilating the ego, but about integrating it into a greater sense of self-awareness. Ego death is a powerful, transformative process, but the goal is not to discard the ego entirely. Instead, the key lies in transforming the ego from a domineering force that controls our thoughts, actions, and behaviors into a supportive ally that works alongside our higher self. This shift in perspective is crucial, as it allows us to reclaim our power and begin to live from a place of balance rather than opposition. The ego, at its core, is not inherently bad. It's a construct of our mind that helps us navigate the physical world. The ego gives us a sense of identity, a sense of self, and it helps us interact with the world around us. Without it, we would struggle to function in the material world, as we wouldn't have the necessary distinctions to operate within it. However, when the ego becomes inflated, when it seeks validation, power, or recognition at the expense of truth and love, it distorts our perception of reality. This is when the ego becomes a problem, pulling us further from our true nature. The process of integrating the ego involves recognizing its purpose and function without allowing it to dominate our sense of self. It's about striking a balance between honoring the ego's role in our lives, while also remaining rooted in the deeper truth of our higher self. As we integrate the ego, we recognize that it is not something to be feared or fought against, but rather something that can be understood, transformed, and utilized for greater good. The first step in this integration process is developing awareness. By becoming aware of the moments when the ego is at play, whether it's through defensiveness, pride, judgment, or comparison, we begin to create space for conscious choice. Awareness allows us to see when we are reacting from a place of ego and to make a conscious decision to act from a place of love and authenticity instead. This shift is not always immediate, and it often requires constant practice. But with time, awareness becomes a natural part of our experience, allowing us to respond to situations with greater mindfulness and intention. As we continue to cultivate awareness, the next step in the integration process is acceptance. We must accept that the ego will always be a part of our experience. It's not something we can simply get rid of. Instead, we learn to accept it as part of our human experience, without allowing it to define us. This acceptance allows us to stop resisting the ego's presence and to approach it with love and understanding. Instead of seeing the ego as an enemy, we begin to view it as a companion, guiding us through the challenges of the physical world while supporting our spiritual growth. Acceptance also means acknowledging the ego's role in our personal growth. The ego in many ways has been a driving force behind our achievements, successes, and survival. Without the ego's desire to improve, to reach for something more, we may not have developed the determination, strength, or resilience that have shaped our lives. By acknowledging this, we can begin to honor the ego's contributions while also freeing ourselves from its control. In the process of integrating the ego, we also begin to release the need for external validation. When the ego operates from a place of seeking approval or recognition, it is constantly dependent on others for its sense of worth. But as we integrate the ego, we start to derive our sense of value from within, recognizing that our worth is inherent and not dependent on external circumstances. This shift allows us to experience true freedom, as we no longer need to rely on the approval of others to feel secure or validated. The next step in integration is embracing the idea of surrender. Surrendering to the flow of life means letting go of the ego's desire to control every outcome, and instead trusting that everything is unfolding as it should. This does not mean passivity or resignation, rather it's an active surrender, a willingness to flow with life, to trust the process, and to allow the universe to guide us. As we surrender to life's flow, we let go of the need to force things to happen, and instead become open to the beauty of the present moment. Through awareness, acceptance, and surrender, we begin the process of integration. Rather than fighting against the ego, we embrace it as a necessary and valuable part of our experience. By integrating the ego into our higher self, we begin to experience a deeper sense of peace, authenticity, and alignment with the truth of who we really are. As we continue on the path of integration, we begin to recognize the wisdom in the ego's desire for survival and recognition. It's important to understand that, at its core, the ego's intentions are not malicious. Rather, the ego has been shaped by experiences, beliefs, and fears, and it is trying to protect us, albeit in ways that may no longer serve us. Why? Viewing the ego with compassion and understanding, we can dismantle its negative influence without diminishing its value. In many ways, the ego operates like a child in need of love and guidance. It may act out in ways that cause harm, but its actions are rooted in fear, insecurity, and a desire for safety. When we treat the ego with the same patience and love we would offer to a frightened child, we begin to shift the dynamics of our inner world. Instead of trying to control or suppress the ego, we create space for it to evolve. This evolution is not about erasing the ego, but about transforming it into a force that supports our growth rather than hindering it. One of the key aspects of direction is the ability to discern when the ego is at play and when the higher self is guiding us. This requires a deep level of self-awareness and a willingness to listen to the subtle whispers of our inner wisdom. While the ego often speaks loudly, driven by desires and fears, the higher self communicates through a quiet, steady voice of truth. The more we practice quieting the noise of the ego, the more attuned we become to the voice of our higher self. This practice of discernment involves developing an inner sense of knowing that transcends logical reasoning or external validation. When we are in alignment with our higher self, we experience a sense of peace, clarity, and purpose that cannot be shaken by external circumstances. The ego, on the other hand, thrives on external stimuli, constantly seeking validation from others and the material world. While practicing discernment, we begin to differentiate between these two voices, the voice of the ego and the voice of the higher self, and allow the higher self to lead us forward. Integration also involves releasing attachment to the ego's narratives about who we are and what we should be. The ego loves to create stories about our worth, our identity, and our place in the world. These stories often limit us, keeping us stuck in old patterns of thinking and being that no longer serve us. While letting go of these stories and embracing the truth of who we are beyond the ego's constructs, we begin to step into our full potential. It's also important to recognize that integration is an ongoing process. There will be times when the ego tries to reassert control, and moments when we feel disconnected from our higher self. This is not a sign of failure, but rather an opportunity to practice deeper alignment and awareness. As we continue to integrate the ego, we become more resilient, more grounded, and more connected to our true nature. This integration, we also find a deeper sense of compassion for others. As we heal our relationship with our own ego, we begin to recognize the same struggles and fears in others. We no longer view others as separate from ourselves, but as fellow travelers on the journey of self-discovery and awakening. This shift in perspective allows us to approach others with empathy and understanding, rather than judgment or criticism. In essence, integration is about finding balance. It's about recognizing the value of the ego and the higher self, and learning to live from a place where both can coexist harmoniously. Rather than seeing the ego as an obstacle to spiritual growth, we begin to see it as a tool for navigating the physical world with greater awareness and wisdom. The more we integrate the ego, the more we align with our higher self and live a life of authenticity, peace, and purpose. As we deepen our understanding of integration, we begin to recognize that it's not a linear process. It's a fluid, evolving journey that requires patience, dedication, and continual self-reflection. At times we may feel as though we are making great strides in integrating the ego, only to encounter moments when the ego resurfaces with old patterns and behaviors. These moments are not setbacks but opportunities to further refine our awareness and understanding. One of the key challenges in this process is learning to recognize when the ego is playing its old tricks. Ego can be sneaky. It often disguises itself in the form of justifications, rationalizations, and excuses. It may present itself as the need to be right, the desire to prove our worth, or the craving for recognition. In these moments, it's crucial to pause, take a breath, and ask ourselves, is this action or thought coming from a place of love and truth, or is it rooted in fear and insecurity? Through this practice of mindfulness and discernment, we begin to shift our relationship with the ego. Rather than reacting impulsively to the ego's triggers, we begin to respond from a place of conscious awareness. This response may involve stepping back from a situation, taking time to reflect, and choosing to act in alignment with our higher self. In doing so, we break free from the patterns of the ego and create space for the higher self to lead the way. It's important to understand that this process of integration is not about perfection. There will be times when we stumble, when we fall back into old egoic patterns, and when we feel disconnected from our higher self. But these moments are part of the journey. They offer valuable lessons, inviting us to deepen our awareness, refine our practices, and return to our true nature. As we continue to integrate the ego, we also begin to notice the subtle shifts in our consciousness. The more we live in alignment with our higher self, the more we experience a sense of peace, clarity, and purpose. Life begins to flow more effortlessly. and we find ourselves responding to challenges with grace and wisdom. This alignment allows us to live with a sense of authenticity and integrity, free from the need for external validation or approval. We also start to notice a deepening of our relationships with others. As we integrate the ego and align with our higher self, we begin to connect with others on a deeper level. We are no longer looking to others for validation or approval, but instead we interact with them from a place of love, compassion, and understanding. This shift in our relationships allows for more meaningful connections and a sense of unity with those around us. Ultimately, the goal of integration is to create a harmonious balance between the ego and the higher self. This balance allows us to navigate the physical world with wisdom and grace, while remaining deeply connected to our spiritual essence. By embracing the ego as a tool for growth and transformation, rather than an obstacle to overcome, we unlock the full potential of our being. Through this process, we come to understand that the ego is not something to be feared or discarded, but something to be understood and integrated. The ego serves as a bridge between the spiritual and material realms, helping us navigate life's challenges while remaining connected to our higher self. As we continue to integrate the ego, we experience greater freedom, peace, and alignment with our true nature. In the end, integration is about embracing all aspects of who we are, our ego, our higher self, and everything in between. It's about living from a place of authenticity and truth, free from the constraints of fear, judgment, and insecurity. And as we do so, we step into our full potential, embodying the love, wisdom, and power that reside within us. The journey of integrating the ego and aligning with the higher self requires not only awareness but also practice. While understanding the nature of the ego and the higher self is crucial, it is through spiritual practices that we deepen our connection to the higher self. These practices help us quiet the noise of the ego, sharpen our intuition, and create space for the wisdom of the higher self to emerge. There are a variety of spiritual practices, each offering unique benefits for those who seek alignment with their true essence. One of the most powerful tools for connecting with the higher self is meditation. Meditation is a practice of stillness, where we cultivate the ability to observe our thoughts without attachment. By sitting in silence, we allow ourselves to let go of the constant stream of thoughts that the ego generates and create space for deeper awareness. In this space of stillness, we become more attuned to the subtle whispers of the higher self, which often communicates in silence, calmness, and clarity. There are many different forms of meditation, each offering its own benefits. For some, guided meditation can be helpful, as it provides structure and direction for the mind. Others may prefer mindfulness meditation, where the goal is to focus on the breath or a particular sensation in the body, cultivating awareness of the present moment. Regardless of the form, the key is to create a practice of stillness, where the ego's distractions can be quieted, allowing the higher self to communicate more clearly. In addition to meditation, another powerful practice for connecting with the higher self is journaling. Journaling offers a way to express thoughts, emotions, and insights that may otherwise remain buried beneath the surface. When we write, we create a direct channel for the subconscious mind to communicate with the conscious mind. In doing so, we often uncover deeper truths that reside within us, offering insight into the ego's limitations and the wisdom of the higher self. Journaling can take many forms, from free writing to guided prompts, depending on what resonates with you. A simple and effective journaling practice involves asking yourself a question, such as, what do I need to know right now, or what is my higher self guiding me toward? Then allow yourself to write freely, without censoring or overthinking. Through this practice, the wisdom of the higher self may begin to flow more easily, providing guidance and clarity on your journey. Another key practice is inner inquiry, which involves asking deep, reflective questions about your life, your beliefs, and your experiences. Inner inquiry is a tool for expanding awareness and uncovering the underlying motivations behind our thoughts and actions. By examining our beliefs and questioning the validity of those beliefs, we can discern whether they are coming from the ego or from the higher self. The questions you ask during inner inquiry can vary depending on what you seek to understand. Examples of questions might include, what fears are guiding my decisions, or how can I align more deeply with my true self? The key to inner inquiry is to approach it with an open mind and heart, willing to uncover the truth, even if it challenges existing beliefs or patterns. This practice can lead to profound self-discovery, as it brings unconscious beliefs and motivations into the light of awareness. Over time, the answers to these questions will become clearer, as the higher self becomes more present and accessible. In addition to meditation, journaling, and inner inquiry, another powerful practice for connecting with the higher self is surrender. Surrender is the act of letting go of the need to control or manipulate outcomes, and instead trusting that the universe is guiding you toward what is best for your growth. The ego often resists surrender because it thrives on control and certainty. However, surrendering to the flow of life allows us to release the grip of the ego and open ourselves to the higher self's guidance. Surrender does not mean giving up or resigning oneself to a passive life. Instead, it's about releasing attachment to specific outcomes and trusting that everything is unfolding as it should. When we surrender, we allow the higher self to take the lead, trusting that it knows what is best for our soul's evolution. In practicing surrender, it's important to cultivate a sense of faith. Faith in yourself, faith in the higher self, and faith in the universe's ability to support your growth. This faith creates a foundation of trust that allows you to move through life with greater ease, knowing that you are being guided every step of the way. Ultimately, the goal of these spiritual practices is to quiet the distractions of the ego and make room for the higher self to speak. The more we commit to practices such as meditation, journaling, inner inquiry, and surrender, the more we attune ourselves to the wisdom of the higher self. These practices help us build a direct connection with our true nature, allowing us to live in alignment with our soul's purpose. Through consistent practice, we begin to experience the peace, clarity, and guidance that comes from living in harmony with our higher self. As we deepen this connection, we become more attuned to the subtle yet powerful guidance that is always available to us. As we continue exploring the practices that help us connect with the higher self, it's important to consider the role of presence. Presence is the state of being fully engaged in the here and now, without attachment to the past or future. When we are present, we are able to hear the quiet voice of the higher self more clearly. The ego, with its endless chatter and constant need for control, often pulls us away from the present moment. But presence creates the spaciousness necessary for the higher self to communicate directly. A simple yet profound practice to cultivate presence is mindful breathing. Mindful breathing involves focusing your attention solely on the breath as it moves in and out of your body. When your mind begins to wander, gently bring your attention back to the sensation of the breath. This practice helps ground you in the present moment and quiets the distractions of the ego. Over time, mindful breathing can become a powerful tool for creating the inner stillness needed to hear the higher self. Another essential practice for connecting with the higher self is gratitude. Gratitude is a powerful force that shifts our perspective from lack to abundance, opening us to the flow of love and wisdom from the higher self. When we express gratitude, we acknowledge the goodness that already exists in our lives, no matter how small. This practice helps shift the focus away from the ego's fears and desires, allowing us to align more closely with the higher self's loving, expansive energy. Gratitude can be practiced in many ways, from keeping a daily gratitude journal to simply taking a moment to reflect on what you are thankful for throughout the day. One powerful practice involves beginning each day by listing 3 things you are grateful for before your feet even hit the floor. This simple act shifts your mindset, setting the tone for a day of connection with your higher self. By making gratitude a habit, you open the door to greater peace, abundance, and alignment with your true nature. Visualization is another tool that can help you connect with the higher self. In visualization, you use the power of the mind to create vivid mental images of what it is you desire or how you wish to experience life. The process of visualization can help you align your inner world with the reality you wish to create, bridging the gap between your ego's desires and the wisdom of the higher self. One way to use visualization to connect with the higher self is to imagine a dialogue between your ego and your higher self. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and visualize yourself standing before a wise, cosent presence. This is your higher self. In this space, you can ask questions, receive guidance, or simply be in the presence of unconditional love. Visualization allows you to experience this connection in a way that feels tangible and real, helping to strengthen your alignment with the higher self. Beyond the individual practices we've explored, Community and support can also play an important role in connecting with the higher self. Surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals who are also on the path of self-awareness and spiritual growth creates a powerful support system. When we share our experiences and insights with others, we are able to deepen our understanding and create a sense of collective wisdom. Joining a spiritual community, whether in person or online, can provide the encouragement and inspiration needed to stay committed to your journey of alignment. These communities often provide resources, discussions, and opportunities for connection that can help you stay grounded in the wisdom of the higher self. At the same time, it is important to be discerning when selecting your community. Ensure that the community you join fosters growth, love, and positive transformation, as the wrong environment can perpetuate the influence of the ego rather than the higher self. Another aspect of connecting with the higher self is through acts of service. When we step outside of ourselves and serve others, we often find that the ego's need for recognition or control falls away. Acts of kindness, compassion, and service allow us to embody the qualities of the higher self, such as love, empathy, and generosity. Through service, we align ourselves with the greater good, contributing to the collective consciousness, while simultaneously nourishing our own connection to the higher self. Service doesn't always have to be grand or world-changing. It can be as simple as offering a helping hand to a neighbor or listening to a friend in need. Every small act of kindness brings us closer to the higher self, as it pulls us out of the ego's self-centered focus and into a space of unconditional love and connection. Through practices like meditation, journaling, inner inquiry, surrender, presence, gratitude, visualization, and service, we can begin to align ourselves with the wisdom of the higher self. These practices are not just techniques but ways of life, tools that we can incorporate into our daily routines to maintain a constant connection to our truest self. Sustaining the connection with your higher self requires consistent practice, patience, and a deep commitment to self-awareness. In a world that often demands our attention and energy, it can be challenging to maintain a constant alignment with the higher self. However, through dedication to the spiritual practices we've discussed, it is possible to navigate the distractions of everyday life while remaining grounded in your true essence. One of the most powerful ways to sustain this connection is through daily ritual. Rituals help create structure and meaning in our lives, providing a way to consciously reconnect with our higher self each day. These rituals don't need to be elaborate or time-consuming. They simply need to be intentional and focused on the spiritual practice that supports your growth. For example, you might begin each morning with a ritual of gratitude, breathing exercises, and a brief meditation. This creates a sacred space that signals to your mind and body that you are stepping into the day with purpose and alignment. By starting your day in a state of mindful awareness, you are more likely to remain connected to the higher self throughout the day. In addition to morning rituals, consider establishing evening practices that allow you to reflect on your day and release any tension or distractions that may have accumulated. Before bed, you might engage in journaling, writing down your thoughts, emotions, and any insights you've received throughout the day. This practice can help you process your experiences, release limiting beliefs, and stay in alignment with the truth of your higher self. Another key element in sustaining connection with the higher self is cultivating discernment. Discernment involves developing the ability to distinguish between the voice of the ego and the voice of the higher self. As we discussed earlier, the ego's voice is often loud, reactive, and fear-based, while the higher self speaks from a place of love, wisdom, and clarity. Throughout your day, practice tuning into your internal dialogue. When you experience a thought or feeling, pause for a moment and ask yourself, is this coming from my ego, or is this aligned with my higher self? This simple question can help you stay grounded and make decisions that are in harmony with your soul's truth. As you cultivate this level of self-awareness, it becomes easier to recognize when the ego has taken the lead and gently course-correct back to your higher self. With practice, you'll find that the voice of the higher self becomes more prominent and the ego's influence diminishes. Another important factor in maintaining your connection to the higher self is surrounding yourself with supportive energy. The people you interact with, the media you consume, and the environments you spend time in all influence your state of being. When you are around individuals who are aligned with their higher selves, you are more likely to remain connected to your own truth. Seek out relationships and communities that foster growth, positivity, and spiritual awakening. This doesn't mean that you should cut ties with everyone who doesn't share your spiritual path, but it's important to prioritize environments that support your highest potential. Just as a plant needs sunlight and nourishment to thrive. Your soul requires the right kind of energy to flourish. Social media and the modern digital landscape can also play a significant role in either strengthening or weakening your connection to the higher self. Consider the types of accounts you follow, the content you consume, and the conversations you engage in online. Are these sources inspiring and uplifting, or do they feed the ego's fears, comparisons, and distractions? To maintain alignment with your higher self, be selective about the energy you allow into your life, especially in the digital realm. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, external circumstances or challenging emotions may still create a disconnect from the higher self. During these times, it is essential to be gentle with yourself and acknowledge that it's okay to experience moments of doubt or struggle. The key is not to resist or judge these experiences, but to allow them to flow through you without attachment. Remember that the higher self is always present, waiting for you to return to it. Even when the ego seems overpowering, you are never truly disconnected from your soul's wisdom. The process of returning to your higher self may require patience, self-compassion, and a willingness to let go of what no longer serves you. Finally, it's essential to celebrate the progress you make on your spiritual journey, no matter how small it may seem. Each step you take in aligning with the higher self is a victory, and every moment of connection deepens your understanding of your true nature. By honoring your progress and trusting the process, you continue to expand into the fullness of who you are. In the modern world, we are constantly bombarded by stimuli, distractions, and demands for our attention. Everywhere we turn, the ego is calling for our focus, pulling us away from our higher self. It is as if the world itself conspires to feed the ego, encouraging us to compare, compete, and chase fleeting rewards. In the midst of this chaos, it can be easy to lose touch with the quiet whisper of the higher self, the voice of wisdom and truth. One of the primary ways the ego asserts itself in modern life is through the pursuit of status. From the clothes we wear, to the cars we drive, from the job titles we hold to the number of followers we have on social media, we are constantly measuring our worth through external validation. The ego thrives on this validation, feeding off the praise, recognition, and material success that society tells us we need to be happy. That this pursuit of status is often empty, leaving us feeling unfulfilled, no matter how much we acquire or achieve. The reason for this emptiness is that the ego's desires are insatiable. It is never satisfied with what it has, always craving more and more external approval. No matter how many accolades we receive or how much wealth we accumulate, the ego will always demand something greater to soothe its restless hunger. This perpetual cycle of seeking external validation can distance us from the truth of who we are, as it distracts us from the deeper wisdom and fulfillment that come from within. Social media has exacerbated this tendency, creating a platform for comparison and competition. We scroll through our feeds and see curated images of other people's seemingly perfect lives, and the ego tells us that we are lacking. We compare ourselves to others, measuring our success, happiness, and worth against the polished images we see online. This constant comparison feeds the ego's narrative that we are not enough as we are, and that we need more followers, more likes, more attention. The ego thrives on this sense of separation, constantly reminding us of our perceived inadequacies. It tells us that we need to prove our worth to the world, and that we must strive for perfection in order to be accepted. But the truth is that this endless pursuit of external validation only strengthens the ego's grip on us, leading us further away from the authentic self. To break free from this cycle, we must first become aware of how the ego operates in our lives. Awareness is the first step in reclaiming our power and reconnecting with our higher self. By observing the ways in which we seek external validation, we can begin to question the beliefs and stories that the ego has convinced us to hold. We must ask ourselves, what am I really seeking through this pursuit? Is it true fulfillment, or is it simply the ego's need for recognition? Once we become aware of the ego's influence, we can begin to detach from the need for external validation and shift our focus inward. True fulfillment comes from aligning with the higher self, not from the approval of others. When we stop seeking validation from the outside world, we can start to find the peace and satisfaction that come from within. Another aspect of modern life that fuels the ego is consumerism. In our society, we are constantly told that happiness can be purchased, whether through material possessions, experiences, or the latest trends. The ego convinces us that we need more things in order to be happy, and that our worth is determined by what we own. This creates an insatiable hunger for more, as we chase after the next shiny object, only to find that it never truly satisfies. The pursuit of material possessions and external achievements distracts us from our true essence. The ego lures us into the trap of thinking that our happiness depends on acquiring more, but this cycle only leads to emptiness. True fulfillment comes not from what we possess, but from who we are, from aligning with our soul's truth and embracing the simplicity and peace that comes with it. To navigate the loud ego in modern life, we must begin to prioritize inner peace over external validation. We must detach from the need to prove ourselves to the world and instead focus on aligning with our true self. This shift in focus requires courage, as it often means stepping away from societal norms and expectations. That the rewards are worth it, a life of inner peace, fulfillment, and alignment with our higher self. In this final part of our exploration of modern life and the loud ego, we'll dive into specific practices and perspectives that can help you detach from the ego's grip and realign with your higher self. It's essential to start by recognizing that while we live in a world that constantly feeds the ego, we have the power to take back control over how we engage with it. The ego thrives in environments where it can constantly compare, compete, and measure success. In a world that promotes individualism and personal achievement above all else, it can be incredibly challenging to resist the ego's call. However, conscious practices that encourage mindfulness and self-awareness can significantly reduce the ego's influence. Mindfulness is one of the most powerful tools in creating a distance between you and your ego. It allows you to witness your thoughts, reactions, and behaviors without attaching to them. Instead of identifying with every passing thought or emotional reaction, you can observe them from a place of detachment. By practicing mindfulness, you begin to create space between you and the ego's desires, enabling you to make more conscious choices about how you respond to the world around you. Another essential practice is meditation. Meditation creates a still space where the mind can quiet and the soul can come forward. In meditation, you are not doing anything, you are simply being. This stillness allows the higher self to emerge, free from the distractions of the ego. As you meditate, you may notice the ego attempting to interrupt with thoughts that seek approval or worry about external matters. But with practice, you can begin to notice these distractions without attaching to them, allowing the inner peace of the higher self to guide you. Surrender is another powerful tool in this process. Surrender is not about giving up, rather it's about releasing the need to control everything. When we surrender, we let go of the ego's need to direct every outcome and allow life to unfold in its own way. The ego often wants to manipulate situations to meet its desires, to prove its worth, to be seen, to gain validation. Surrendering to the flow of life allows us to trust that the universe, or our higher self, will guide us to what we need. One of the most potent ways to counter the ego's influence is by practicing gratitude. When we focus on what we already have rather than what we lack, we shift our focus from the ego's craving to a place of abundance. Gratitude brings us back into the present moment and helps us appreciate what is truly valuable: our health, relationships, experiences, and inner peace. The ego thrives on a sense of scarcity, always wanting more, always believing that happiness lies just beyond our reach. Gratitude, on the other hand, shifts the narrative and helps us recognize that we are already whole. In addition to these individual practices, it is essential to surround ourselves with people and environments that support our highest good. When we are around people who are grounded in their higher selves, their energy can help us remain centered and aligned with our own truth. Conversely, environments that encourage competition, comparison, and materialism will only amplify the ego's voice. It's important to assess the energy of the spaces you inhabit and the people you engage with. Do they uplift your soul, or do they reinforce your ego's desire for validation? Another practice that can help us reconnect with our higher self is through creative expression. Whether it's art, music, writing, or any other form of creative output, creativity allows us to express our soul's voice without the interference of the ego. When we engage in creative activities, we step into a flow state where time and self-consciousness fade away. In these moments of creative expression, we are often closest to our higher self, as we let go of the need to control and simply allow the energy to flow. A final important consideration is the practice of service to others. When we give freely without expectation of return, we shift the focus away from our ego's desires and towards something larger than ourselves. Acts of kindness, charity, and love are expressions of the higher self. In serving others, we experience the joy of connecting with the essence of who we are, beings of love, unity, and compassion. By consciously engaging in these practices and becoming more aware of the ego's subtle grip on our lives, we can begin to lessen its power. In doing so, we make room for the wisdom, peace, and clarity of our higher self to emerge. Living from this place of alignment is not always easy, but it is always worth it. As we journey through modern life, we can learn to navigate the ego's loud voice with grace, allowing the quiet whisper of our true selves to guide us toward fulfillment, peace, and love. In the next chapter, we will explore the concept of ego death and the sacred process of awakening to the higher self. The journey from the ego to the higher self is not just one of internal transformation, it is also about how we express our truest essence in the world. Living as the higher self involves embodying the divine wisdom and consciousness that resides within us, acting in alignment with our soul's purpose, and offering our unique gifts to the world without attachment to outcome. To live from the higher self is to operate from a state of presence. Presence means being fully engaged in the moment, without distraction from the past or future, free from the ego's constant chatter. When we are present, we feel an inherent peace and joy that emanates from our true self. This peace does not depend on external circumstances, rather, it arises from our connection to our inner source of wisdom and love. To live as the higher self is also to live from a place of unconditional love and compassion. The higher self knows that love is the essence of our being, and it expresses this love freely to all beings. In every interaction, we are invited to step into our divine nature, to see beyond the surface and acknowledge the inherent worth and sacredness of others. Living as the higher self is not just about loving others, it's also about loving ourselves, without judgment, embracing our imperfections as part of the divine plan. When we live as the higher self, we experience the world as interconnected. The higher self understands that all beings are expressions of the same universal source, and this realization brings a sense of unity and oneness with all of life. This interconnectedness inspires acts of kindness, empathy, and service to others, knowing that when we uplift another, we are also uplifting ourselves. One of the key characteristics of the higher self is its sense of purpose. Living as the higher self means living in alignment with your soul's mission, whatever that may be. It is not about following societal expectations or fulfilling the ego's desires for recognition, but about responding to the call of the soul. When we are in alignment with our soul's purpose, we feel fulfilled, and our actions become an expression of our divine essence. Living from the higher self does not mean that challenges or difficulties won't arise. In fact, the journey of life can often involve moments of intense growth and transformation that are not always comfortable. But when we are grounded in the higher self, we navigate these challenges with grace and resilience, trusting that every experience is an opportunity for deeper awakening. The higher self sees challenges not as obstacles, but as invitations for growth, understanding, and expansion. To live as the higher self, we must also embrace the concept of surrender. Surrender does not mean passivity or giving up. Rather, it is the willingness to release control and allow life to unfold according to the divine plan. The ego wants to control outcomes, seek approval, and manipulate situations to ensure its own survival and success. The higher self, however, trusts that all things are working together for the highest good and is at peace with the unfolding of life. Living as the higher self requires us to be patient and gentle with ourselves. There will be moments when the ego tries to reassert itself, when doubts and fears surface. But the higher self remains calm and steady, trusting the process and knowing that every step on the journey is an opportunity for greater wisdom and connection to Source. It is important to remember that living as the higher self is a practice, not a destination. It's about the ongoing commitment to stay present, to love unconditionally, to act with purpose, and to be an expression of divine consciousness in the world. Living as the higher self is not just about theory or spiritual practices. It is about bringing this wisdom into practical, everyday life. We are living in a world that constantly demands our attention, with distractions, noise, and pressures at every turn. Yet, to truly live as the higher self means to cultivate moments of stillness and awareness amidst the chaos. It is about learning to center ourselves, no matter what is happening around us, and consistently returning to the truth of who we are. One of the most powerful tools in living from the higher self is mindfulness. Mindfulness is the practice of being present in the moment, without judgment or attachment to thoughts and feelings. It is the ability to observe what arises within us, emotions, thoughts, sensations, and to recognize them without becoming entangled in them. Mindfulness allows us to step back from the constant chatter of the ego and create a space of inner calm, where we can more clearly hear the wisdom of the higher self. When we practice mindfulness, we become aware of the subtle ways in which the ego attempts to pull us out of alignment. We notice when we begin to feel anxious, defensive, or fearful, and we can choose to redirect our attention to the present moment and return to a place of peace. In these moments, the higher self invites us to let go of the need for control and surrender to the flow of life. Surrender does not mean resignation, it means trusting that everything is unfolding perfectly, even if we cannot see the full picture. Another way to live from the higher self is through conscious decision-making. Every choice we make, no matter how small, is an opportunity to align with our true nature. When we make decisions from the ego, we are often driven by fear, insecurity, or the need for external validation. But when we make choices from the higher self, we are guided by intuition, inner wisdom, and a deep sense of trust in the universe. This can be as simple as choosing to respond with kindness in a difficult situation, or as profound as making life-altering decisions based on a sense of purpose and alignment. To live as the higher self is also to cultivate deep compassion for others. When we see others through the lens of the higher self, we recognize that they are also divine beings on their own journey. We understand that their actions, however challenging or hurtful they may be, are often driven by their own fears, insecurities, and conditioning. Instead of reacting with judgment or anger, the higher self sees beyond the surface and responds with empathy and understanding. Living as the higher self means embracing the interconnectedness of all beings. We realize that when we harm others, we are ultimately harming ourselves, and when we help others, we are lifting ourselves up as well. This recognition fosters a sense of unity and encourages us to act with integrity and love in all our interactions. By embodying these qualities in our daily lives, we become a living example of the higher self and inspire others to awaken to their own truth. Living as the higher self also requires a willingness to release attachment to outcomes. When we live from the ego, we often seek validation, approval, and external rewards. But when we live from the higher self, we are free from the need for recognition. We are guided by a sense of purpose that transcends external circumstances. We do what is right, not because we expect a reward, but because it is aligned with our true nature. The higher self also teaches us the importance of forgiveness. Forgiveness is not about condoning harmful behavior or letting others off the hook. It is about releasing the grip of resentment and anger, which are toxic to our well-being. Forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves, freeing us from the burden of negative emotions and allowing us to step back into our true essence. The more we live from the higher self, the more we begin to embody peace, love, and wisdom. The thoughts, words, and actions become a reflection of our inner alignment with the divine, and we begin to attract more of the same energy into our lives. We no longer need to chase happiness or fulfillment because we recognize that they are already within us, inherent in our true nature. Living as the higher self is a continual practice of returning to our essence, remembering who we truly are. It is about embracing the fullness of life, with all its beauty and challenges, and choosing to respond from a place of love, compassion, and wisdom. To live as the higher self is to live with purpose, clarity, and a sense of deep fulfillment. The higher self is not bound by the limitations of the ego, fear, insecurity, or societal expectations. Instead, it operates from a place of infinite wisdom, love, and peace, trusting in the flow of life. Living from this place means that we are no longer swayed by external conditions or approval, but we are grounded in the truth of who we really are. When we embody the higher self, we experience life with a sense of profound meaning. Each moment becomes an opportunity to align with our soul's mission and serve others in the process. Every action, thought, and interaction is an expression of our inner divinity, and this brings a sense of joy and fulfillment that is not contingent on external circumstances. As we live more fully from the higher self, we become more attuned to the rhythms of the universe, and we begin to see how everything is interconnected. Living from the higher self also requires letting go of the need for perfection. The higher self understands that life is not about being flawless or achieving some external measure of success. Instead, it's about embracing the journey, learning from mistakes, and continually evolving in alignment with our true nature. When we let go of perfectionism, we release the pressure to constantly perform, and we allow ourselves to be fully human, experiencing the beauty and imperfection of life with grace. To live as the higher self is also to embrace vulnerability. Vulnerability means being open to love, to connection, and to the full range of human experience, without the fear of judgment or rejection. It is the courage to be seen as we truly are, without the mask of the ego or the need to protect ourselves. In this vulnerability, we create space for deeper connection, healing, and the exchange of love and wisdom. The higher self also guides us to live with intention and authenticity. When we are in alignment with our true selves, we no longer feel the need to conform to societal expectations or live up to someone else's ideals. We understand that our purpose is unique to us, and that it is our responsibility to walk the path that resonates most deeply with our soul. Living authentically means honoring our inner truth, no matter how unconventional or misunderstood it may seem. One of the most profound aspects of living as the higher self is the sense of inner peace that arises from within. Peace is not something that we seek externally. It is something that comes from within when we are in harmony with our soul. The more we live as the higher self, the more we experience this peace in every aspect of our lives, regardless of external circumstances. This peace is unshakable because it is rooted in the eternal truth of who we are, and it transcends the fluctuations of the material world. In practical terms, living from the higher self means showing up as the best version of ourselves in every situation. It is about being present in every interaction, listening with an open heart, and offering our true self without expectation or fear. When we live from this place, we attract more love, abundance, and joy into our lives, because we are in alignment with the natural flow of the universe. As we cultivate this state of being, we also begin to inspire others to remember their true selves, creating a ripple effect of awakening and transformation. Living as the higher self also requires us to embrace abundance, not just in material terms but in all aspects of life. Abundance is the recognition that the universe is abundant and that there is more than enough to go around. When we live from the higher self, we are no longer attached to scarcity or fear of lack. We understand that abundance is a state of mind, and when we align with it, we attract more of it into our lives. As we bring all of these principles into our daily lives, presence, love, authenticity, peace, and abundance, we become living embodiments of the higher self. Our lives become a reflection of our inner transformation, and we inspire others to embark on their own journey of self-discovery and awakening. In living as the higher self, we transcend the limitations of the ego and become fully aligned with the divine wisdom and love that reside within us. Ultimately, living as the higher self is a journey of continual growth, unfolding, and expansion. It is not about reaching a destination or achieving a perfect state, but about embracing the ongoing process of becoming more aligned with our true essence. And as we continue on this journey, we find ourselves living in harmony with the universe, guided by love, wisdom, and inner peace.